Lin Fan's flashlight beam trembled and cut through the night in a thick fog. The entrance to the 1,000-year-old ancient cemetery in the remote mountain village was like a huge gaping mouth, swallowing up the surrounding moonlight. The wind was mingled with the smell of rotting earth, making people's stomachs churn. He took a deep breath, suppressed the inexplicable throbbing in his chest, and turned to look at his two companions behind him. Li Xiu's face was as white as grave soil, his legs were weak, and he was holding the engineer's multifunctional toolbox tightly, his teeth chattering. Lin Fan, you're fucking crazy. This place is so gloomy during the day, why do you come to visit at night? Haven't you read those missing persons cases on the internet? They all happened at midnight, and the undead crawled out to gnaw on human bones. His voice was as sharp as a cat with its tail stepped on, and his eyes were fixed on the mottled stone tablet at the entrance, which was engraved with twisted ancient scripts, as if it would come alive and crawl on his neck at any time. Yi Ji stood aside, her beautiful face looked particularly pale under the flashlight, her red eyes were slightly narrowed, her red lips were slightly opened, and her voice was as low and seductive as the mountain wind. Mr. Li, don't panic. I have heard the legend of the cemetery many times. These are the tombs of warlocks from the Warring States period. They used blood sacrifices to seal endless resentful spirits. They slept during the day and woke up at midnight. The walls would shift, and there were things crawling under the floor. But since Mr. Lin has cracked the clue, let's go in and take a look. She glanced at Lin Fan, with an elusive light flashing in her eyes. She touched the ancient jade pendant around her waist with her delicate hand, which faintly glowed green in the night. Lin Fan smiled, squatted down, ignored Li Xiu's complaints, put the flashlight on his shoulder, and carefully looked at the runes on the stone door. These lines are winding like living snakes, exuding a faint phosphorescence, and the air is filled with a moist smell of mold and rot, mixed with a faint earthy smell in the distance. Don't argue, you two. This rune is a variant of the spirit sealing array, which is used by magicians to lock the entrance to the maze. Look here, he pointed at a crossed blood-red rune, his tone as calm as explaining in class, the missing radical of the word open in the middle can be unlocked by just filling it in. Li Xiu's eyes widened, his mouth opened in an O shape, and the toolbox fell to the ground with a thud. How do you know? You just take a second look at this 1,000-year-old antique. If the curse is triggered, we will all turn into mummies. His voice trembled violently, cold sweat dripped from his forehead, and his hands involuntarily hugged him, as if the surrounding graves had grown claws. Yi Ji's pupils dilated slightly and her breathing became a little faster. She moved closer to Lin Fan, and the fragrant wind filled her nostrils, but it was mixed with the coldness of the grave soil. Mr. Lin, how did you see it? Grandpa said that these runes can only be understood by the descendants of the guardians. My ancestors guarded this cemetery. There was a tremor in her voice, and she touched the stone door lightly with her slender fingers. The runes on the door actually lit up slightly, making her shrink back suddenly. Lin Fan ignored their shock, took out his dagger and carved the missing strokes on the stone door. In an instant, the ground trembled slightly, and the stone door made a low roar, like the breathing of a giant beast waking up. The dust fell, and cold mist poured out from the crack in the door, going straight into the noses of the three of them, choking Li Xiu and coughing repeatedly. It's open. Lin Fan stood up, clapped his hands, and stepped in first. The three of them filed into the tomb passage. The air was instantly cold and biting, like being immersed in an ice cave. The flashlight light cast long shadows in the narrow passage. The walls were densely engraved with curse runes, and those symbols squirmed slightly like insects, casting strange blood shadows under the beam. In the distance, there was a faint murmur, low and intermittent, like countless people whispering in their ears, telling the resentment that would never be transcended. Li Xiu's breathing became heavier and heavier, his steps staggered, and he clung to the corner of Lin Fan's clothes. Did you hear that? That sounded like a ghost. Lin Fan, let's go back. I regret it. There is definitely something wrong with this place. Yi walked in the middle, her face getting paler. Her flashlight swept across the wall, and the runes reflected a faint green light, twisting her shadow into a ghost. These runes tell the story of the magician. He used human sacrifices to build an underground maze and hide lost treasures. But when midnight comes, the maze comes alive, the walls move, and the evil spirits crawl. Mr. Lin, are you sure you want to continue? Her voice was full of fear, but there was also excitement hidden in it, and her red phoenix eyes frequently glanced at Lin Fan. Lin Fan nodded, walking steadily, and his nose smelled a stronger smell of decay, like the smell of corpses that had been buried for thousands of years. What are you afraid of? The treasure is deep in the depths. Those legends are just to deter tomb robbers. Look, there is a branch road here, and the runes point to the left. He took the lead and turned, his flashlight illuminating a side room filled with pottery figurines. The figurines looked like hollow eyes, as if staring at them. Li Xiu screamed and ran into Yi's arms. The statues are moving. Their eyes are blinking. Don't make trouble, it's an illusion of light and shadow. Lin Fan said calmly, reaching out to smooth Li Xiu's back, but he heard the murmur in the distance getting louder, like a rising tide. They moved on, excitement slowly giving way to depression. The tomb passage became narrower and narrower, and the runes on the walls began to heat up, making the tentacles scalding hot. Li Xiu's complaints turned into sobs. Why should I listen to you? That guy from Chu Tian might as well be late, so he doesn't have to accompany us to death. Suddenly, a low bell rang from the ground, midnight. It was like rolling thunder, making the eardrums buzz. The three of them froze, and the rotten smell increased sharply in the air, as if thousands of corpses were rotting at the same time. Yi's expression suddenly changed and her beautiful eyes widened. Midnight is here. The legend is true. Immediately afterwards, there was a dense crawling sound of crawlers under the floor. Rustling. Countless tiny footsteps, like tens of millions of cockroaches running wildly in the soil, rushing towards their feet. The ground trembled slightly. Li Xiu screamed and squatted down with his ears to the ground. They are coming. They are climbing up. Lin Fan, help. Yi's breathing was rapid, and she grabbed Lin Fan's arm with her delicate hands, her nails digging into the flesh. The floor is moving. The resentful spirit is coming out. Lin Fan's heart was beating wildly, but he forced himself to calm down and glance around. The wall slowly shifted, making a creaking sound like grinding teeth, and the passage began to narrow, cutting off the escape route. The crawling sound got closer and closer, so close that you could feel the heat and smell under the floor. What's even more terrifying is the sound of footsteps, heavy, wet shuffling footsteps, approaching from the depths of darkness. Li Xiu collapsed, and his voice was hoarse. We are dead. The cemetery is alive, and the maze is swallowing us up. Yi's eyes flashed with despair, but she stared at Lin Fan. Mr. Lin, can you do anything? Lin Fan swallowed, held the flashlight tightly, and ran through the rune clues in his mind. The crawling sound was close at hand, the wall completely blocked the rear, and a pale hand shadow flashed on the far wall. They are trapped. The footsteps became louder and louder, accompanied by a low growl, like a hungry beast. Lin Fan took a deep breath and stared at a hidden rune in front of him, knowing that this was just the beginning. At the end of the tomb passage, a larger stone door slowly emerged, with runes flashing red. But something like a black tentacle was poking out of the cracks in the floor, crawling toward their ankles. Li Xiu collapsed on the ground, peed his pants, and cried, "Don't come here. Lin Fan, aren't you a genius at solving puzzles? Find a way." Yi Jiqiang stood up, her face twisted, and her beauty revealed despair. Legend of the Guardian. Only blood can open it. She bit her finger and blood dripped down the runes, but there was no movement. The crawling sound was like a torrential downpour as the walls continued to shift, forcing them into a blind corner. Lin Fan's eyes narrowed. He recalled the variant of the entrance rune, whipped out his dagger, and carved a reverse formation on the wall. "It's not blood, it's rebellion." The dagger slashed across, the runes brightened, the stone door suddenly opened, and a hot wind hit his face, mixed with the precious aura of metal. Li Xiu raised his head, his eyes widened like bells, and his voice trembled. You cracked it again? Oh my god, Lin Fan, are you a god?" Yi Ji's chest rose and fell violently, admiration and fear intertwined. "It's impossible, this is a forbidden technique from our ancestors, how could you?" But there was no time to rejoice. The moment the door was opened, a crawling sound erupted from behind. Countless black shadows spurted out from the cracks in the floor, coming like a tide, making a harsh hissing sound. The walls were completely closed, the footsteps were 10 meters away, and there was a heavy wet sound accompanied by the stench of rotten flesh mopping the floor. "Run!" Lin Fan shouted, pulling Li Xiu up, followed by Yi Ji, and the three of them rushed into the new tomb passage. Behind him, a monster-like roar sounded, and the cemetery completely woke up. As they ran, the flashlight swayed and illuminated more runes on the wall, faintly pieced together into a distorted human face. The murmur turned into wild laughter, and the crawling sound was like thousands of insects gnawing at the bones. Li Xiu cried while running, "Lin Fan, you saved us once, but this time, how can we escape?" Ahead, another wall moved slowly, blocking the way. Footsteps were approaching, so close that you could smell the smell of blood and rot. A pale figure emerged in the darkness. "Mushue." "No, that's not a person." Lin Fan stopped and stared at the new runes on the wall, clues flashing through his mind. In crisis, his fingers flew, carving out solutions. Li Xiu and Yi Ji were stunned. The world seemed to have stopped, leaving only their widened eyes and trembling breathing. The stone door opened, but this time, a more terrifying bell echoed from the depths. The crawlers had crawled onto their shoes, cold and slimy. The sound of footsteps was just 3 meters behind me. They fell deeper into the maze, and the unknown fear opened its mouth like a giant beast. Lin Fan's calmness was the only fire. Yi Ji's breathing was irregular. She grabbed Lin Fan's sleeve and dug her nails into his arm, drawing blood marks. Her beautiful face was as pale as paper. Fear and dependence were intertwined in Danfeng's eyes. "Mr. Lin, those are not insects, they are the claws of resentful spirits." Grandpa said, "After waking up at midnight, they will emerge from the soil, first gnaw the feet, and then swallow the soul." Her ancient jade pendant emits a dazzling green light, reflecting the wriggling runes on the wall. Those symbols twist like living snakes, casting blood-red shadows, lengthening the terrified outlines of the three of them. The footsteps behind him were as heavy as war drums, dragging wetly, and each step was accompanied by the crackling sound of broken bones. The fishy sweet smell of rotten meat hit his nostrils, so close that it felt as if hot breath was spraying on the back of his neck. The soles of Lin Fan's shoes were sticky and cold, and the black shadows squeezed out from the cracks in the floor were like slippery maggots, squirming upwards along his calves, making a tiny hissing sound, like countless small mouths gnawing at the flesh. He shook his legs violently and threw off a few, only to hear Li Xiu scream even more horribly, "They're coming up. They've crawled into my pants, Lin Fan, step on them to death." Li Xiu slapped his thighs with his hands like crazy, his face twisted into a ball, snot and tears mixed with sweat dripping down his pants, a hole had been torn in his trousers, and black tentacle-like things were twisting inside, exuding a strong rotten smell of corpse insects, which went straight into the nasal cavity, making people sick and sick. "Don't stop. Move forward." Lin Fan growled through gritted teeth, his voice as steady as a rock. He shook off Yi Ji's hand and pulled out a construction shovel from Li Xiu's toolbox. The shovel blade shone coldly under the flashlight. He shoveled the floor under his feet with a backhand, and with a clang, the cracks widened, revealing a dense squirming black shadow underneath, countless slender claws, as sharp as needles, covered with purple-black pus, scratching madly in the soil, making a crawling sound like a rustling rainstorm. Those claws were not insects, but half-rotted undead fingers. The broken finger bones were hung with residual flesh, and the phosphorescence shone, as if thousands of hands were stretched out under the soil, eager to grasp the warmth of the living. When Li Xiu saw this scene, his eyes widened as if they were about to burst out, his mouth opened wide but no sound came out, only the sobs gurgling in his throat. He collapsed on the ground, holding his head in his hands, his pants were soaked, and the smell of urine mixed with the smell of corpses filled the air. What the hell is this? Lin Fan, let's retreat. Retreat quickly. Is the entrance still open? Go back and call Chu Tian, that bastard, he deserves to be late. His voice was as sharp as breaking glass, and his legs were shaking like cramps. He tried to get up but slipped in the mucus, and his face was covered with despairing mud. Lin Fan ignored him and hit the shovel 3 times in a row, causing the floor to crack even more. The sound of crawling came like a tidal wave. His claws had climbed up the sides of his boots, and it was bone-chilling cold. He took a sharp breath, his nose filled with the stench of earthy and rotten mixture, suppressing the nausea in his heart, and glanced behind him. The stone door at the entrance had been completely closed, the walls were wriggling like living flesh, and the green light flickered in the gaps, completely sealed. The entrance is gone, the wall is moving. Li Xiu, get up, Yi Ji, lead the way. His tone was strangely calm, like an archaeology in the field rather than a maze of death, which stunned the 2 partners. At the end of the tomb passage, an arched door frame emerged. Yi Ji took the lead and rushed into the second tomb chamber. The air in the room was even hotter, mixed with the ashes of old incense. She took out a few broken torches from the corner and lit the lighter with her trembling hand. The flames sprang up and crackled, and the orange-red flame suddenly illuminated the entire tomb chamber. The shadows on the wall instantly distorted, elongating into countless ghostly hands, and their crooked knuckles stretched toward them, as if trying to grab them from the wall. The flickering light of the fire reflected a stone platform in the center of the room. Clay pots were scattered on the table. The black ash in the pots was like bone powder. The pungent smell of sulfur filled the air, making Li Xiu cough. Yi Ji's pupils shrank suddenly. She swallowed her fear and forced herself to nod. The ancient jade pendant trembled on her chest, and the green light reflected her pale lips. Okay, the second tomb is over here. Grandpa mentioned that there are torch remains there that can provide light. Follow me. She gritted her teeth and pulled Li Xiu up, and the 3 of them stumbled forward. The flashlight light flickered in the narrow tomb passage, the runes on the wall blinked like eyes, and the murmur turned into a low laugh, drilling straight into the brain. The footsteps were still approaching, and the heavy wet sound made the ground tremble slightly every time, as if a giant beast was hunting. Fire, the fire has stabilized, and those claws have retreated. Li Xiu slumped against the wall, his voice still trembling, his eyes fixed on the floor. As expected, the crawling sound stopped, leaving only sporadic rustling, faintly coming from the depths of the cracks, like a swarm of insects gathering strength. He wiped his face, his nosebleed mixed with sweat, and his pants were dirty and wet. Lin Fan, you just smashed it with a shovel, how did you know it was a claw? What if you smashed more? We were almost eaten up. Lin Fan didn't look back. He was already squatting by the wall, with the flashlight on his shoulder and the dagger in his hand, quickly recording the runes. Those blood-red lines were like pulsating blood vessels, intertwined into a complex formation. He traced the grooves with his fingers, piecing together the pattern in his mind, ignoring the coldness around him. This is a variation of the defensive formation, used by magicians to protect the core of the tomb. Reversing it will block the reptiles, temporarily. His voice was steady, and the firelight reflected on his face, which made him look chiseled and calm, making Yi Ji's breath stagnant. Yi Ji came closer, raised the torch, and put the green jade pendant close to the rune. It resonated slightly and made a low hum. Her eyes widened, and her voice trembled with confusion. Mr. Lin, how do you understand it again? This is a forbidden technique passed down from ancestors. Only the blood of the guardian can solve it. My grandfather only taught me a little bit before he died. You can reverse it after just a few glances. Impossible. Her delicate hands involuntarily clenched the torch, her knuckles turned white, admiration mixed with doubts, the fragrant sweat slid down her neck into her collar, and her skin glowed seductively under the firelight, but it was twisted by fear. When Li Xiu heard this, he got up and came closer. His eyes were as wide as bells. He opened the toolbox and took out the magnetic field instrument, the small silver box beeped. His fingers flew to adjust, and the data on the screen jumped wildly. I'm testing, the magnetic field here is out of order, there must be some resentful spirit interfering. The instrument suddenly screamed, the screen flashed black, green smoke came out, and the burning smell hit your nostrils. Li Xiu was dumbfounded. His hands shook so much that the instrument fell to the ground, and his voice became hoarse, it's broken, it's broken. Lin Fan, even the technology in this damn place is out of order. Why do you still remember the runes? Let's relax. The crawling has stopped, maybe it's safe. The three of them finally took a breath and calmed down. The torch light became steady, and the crawling sound faded away. Only the sound of dripping water echoed in the tomb, like tears falling to the ground. Lin Fan put away the dagger, stood up, and smelled something strange in his nose, the smell of dry dust, mixed with a touch of blood. He turned around and glanced at the shadow next to the stone platform with his flashlight, revealing a mummy. The corpse was huddled in the corner, skinny and bones, with skin as chapped as old tree bark, hollow eye sockets and deep-set teeth, and yellowing teeth. The body was in a torn Taoist robe embroidered with twisted runes, and the whole body exuded a moldy and ancient aura, like a fruit that had been dried for thousands of years. Li Xiu was the first to see it, his scream stuck in his throat, he sat on his butt and the torch was almost extinguished. Corpse, corpse. Why is it here? I didn't see it just now. His face was paler than the corpse. He backed up with his hands on the ground and knocked over the clay pot. Black ash spilled out like bone powder, making him cough. Yiji's torch trembled, and the green jade pendant flashed wildly. She took a step back, her beautiful eyes widened, and her voice was as low as a mosquito, this is, the servant of the magician. Grandpa said that there are corpses guarding the tomb. They are immortal and will wake up at midnight. Mr. Lin, don't come close. Lin Fan took a step forward, squatted down and took a closer look at the mummy, shining the flashlight directly into his eye sockets, ignoring Li Xiu's sobs and Yiji's warning. His fingers touched the corpse robe lightly, the fabric crisped like paper, and the runes were faintly warm. This guy has been dead for at least 500 years, and the traces of the formation on his robe are the same as those on the wall. He muttered to himself, analyzing it calmly, leaving his two companions stunned. Li Xiu's mouth opened and closed, and his voice trembled, saying, You touched the corpse. Lin Fan, you are crazy. What if it bites you? Yiji's chest heaved violently. She stared at Lin Fan's back, shock and admiration flashed in her eyes, he is not afraid. He even dares to touch the mummy, but we. Before she could finish her words, the mummy suddenly trembled. 2 dots of phosphorus fire lit up deep in the eye sockets, and the chapped lips slowly opened, uttering a hoarse whisper, like the whistle of the wind blowing through the dry bones, the guardian, returns. The voice went straight into the mind, biting cold, and filled with endless resentment. The air instantly became stagnant, and the smell of sulfur increased sharply. Li Xiu's scream exploded, the torch fell to the ground, and sparks flew everywhere, it's alive. It's talking. Lin Fan, run. He got up and bumped into Yiji. The two fell to the ground entangled, and fear made him need to urinate again. Yiji screamed, and the green jade pendant shattered into pieces and glowed brightly, reflecting the mummy slowly sitting up, its joints rattling, and its claws stretched out towards them. What's even scarier is that the walls start to move. The crunching sound of grinding teeth sounded, like a giant beast chewing stones, the shadow ghost's hand stretched intensified, and the tomb passage slowly narrowed, cutting off all escape routes. The crawling sound erupted again, coming from all directions, the cracks in the floor expanded, and black claws flooded in. Footsteps approached from behind the wall, heavy wet dragging, accompanied by a low growl. Lin Fan jumped up and kicked over the mummy. The phosphorus fire was extinguished, but the whisper echoed, "The Guardian, returned," the bloodline, opened. He grabbed the torch and stared at the newly changed runes on the wall, knowing that the crisis was escalating. Yi Ji and Li Xiu's eyes widened as they saw his figure standing upright in the firelight. All that was left in the world was their panting and despair. Lin Fan's dagger slashed through the runes on the wall like lightning. The shadow like a twisted human face convulsed under the tip of the knife. The blood-red lines pulsed more intensely, making a sizzling sound, like living flesh being burned by a soldering iron. The smell of sulfur rose sharply in the air, mixed with the moldy ashes on the mummy's robes, and shot straight into the nose, burning the lungs. His fingers flew, filling in the missing strokes. The reverse formation method started. The runes suddenly lit up, and green light burst out from Yi Ji's broken jade pendant, resonating with the formation on the wall, buzzing and humming like a swarm of bees. The creaking and grinding sound of the wall suddenly stopped, and the shadows of those ghostly hands suddenly retracted into the cracks in the stone, as if they were crushed by invisible iron pincers. The black claws on the floor receded like a tide, leaving only scattered sand and sand buried deep in the cracks. The wall closed in, leaving only a narrow gap. The mummy crawled with its claws on the ground, and the reptiles had reached its ankles. In the unknown depths, the bell rings again, and the maze wakes up completely. Lin Fan's dagger flashed, and his fingers flew, preparing to reverse, but this time, a twisted human face faintly appeared behind the runes, the evil spirit of the warlock. Their fate hangs on a thread. Yi Ji's torch almost fell to the ground. Her beautiful face was as pale as porcelain in the afterglow of green light. Her fingernails were embedded in her palms, bleeding. Danfeng's eyes were wide open, and her pupils reflected Lin Fan's chiseled profile. Admiration surged up like a tide, but it was mixed with deeper doubts and fears. "Mr. Lin, this formation is an ancestral taboo. Those with impure blood will be burned when touched. Are your hands okay?" Her breathing was erratic, her chest heaved violently, her collar was soaked with sweat, and her skin had an alluring but twisted luster under the firelight. She couldn't help but step forward and tugged on Lin Fan's sleeve. Her fingertips were as cold as grave soil. "Grandpa said that reversal requires a sacrifice of living blood. You can tell after just a few glances, it's impossible. Who are you?" Lin Fan threw off his sleeves, the remaining heat of the runes on the dagger was hot to his hands. He turned around, the firelight reflected his calm eyes, ignoring the echo of the mummy's whisper, "The Guardian, returns." The whistle sounded like a ghost crying, faintly seeping out from the cracks in the wall. "Don't panic, it's not a blood talent. Scientific explanation, there is geothermal anomaly under this cemetery." The insects expanded due to heat and squeezed out from the cracks, looking like claws. The wall movement is the aftermath of the earthquake, and the runes are anti-seismic structures carved by the ancients. I added strokes to strengthen the balance point. His voice was as steady as a lecture. His flashlight swept over the mummy. The servant had collapsed back to his original position. The phosphorus fire was dim, and only the bones were trembling. The smell of blood in the air was gone, replaced by damp earthy smell. After hearing this, Li Xiu stood up and took out the laser rangefinder tremblingly from the toolbox. The red dot laser danced on the wall. His fingers flew around and pressed the buttons. The screen beeped and data flashed wildly. "Yes, yes. Lin Fan is right, let me test it." The instrument buzzed, and the red light swept across the narrowed wall gap, showing that the wall thickness was only half a meter, but it suddenly became stable and no longer squirmed. Li Xiu's eyes lit up with a glimmer of hope, and his nose wiped his sleeves. His voice was still trembling but filled with ecstasy. "Look. The wall's speed has dropped to 0. It's an earthquake, absolutely. The magnetic field meter burned out because of thermal interference, and the bugs are geothermal insect swarms. We're fine, Lin Fan, please help. He rushed forward to pat Lin Fan on the shoulder, but his legs were weak and he slipped. His butt hit the broken floor with a crunching sound, causing sporadic black ash to scatter. Li Xiu's scream was stuck in his throat. He slumped on the ground. The smell of urine in his pants had not dissipated. His eyes were as wide as bells, his mouth opened in an O shape, and nosebleed dripped down his chin, making a slight sizzle when it hit the black ash bone powder. Stop, stop. The wall doesn't move. All the claws are gone. His voice trembled like a candle in the wind. He climbed up with his hands on the ground. The overturned pottery pot flew up with black ash, which made him cough repeatedly. However, he stared at Lin Fan's back, with despair and disbelief mixed on his face. Lin Fan, how the hell did you do that? Reversal with one knife? Isn't this an illusion? My heart is going to beat out. Yi Ji bit her lip, her beautiful eyes twinkling. She raised the torch high, the afterglow of green light reflected the pottery pot on the stone platform, and the black ash was slowly settling like bone meal. But, folk rumors say that the undead wake up at midnight, and the cemetery comes alive. Grandpa said that the magician's blood sacrifice will seal the evil spirits, and the servants who guard the corpse will crawl out and gnaw on the bones. Her voice was as low as a whisper, and her delicate hands touched the fragments of the jade pendant. Her fingertips trembled, and the fragrant sweat slid down her neck. The firelight stretched her seductive curves, but they were distorted into ghosts by the shadows. Rumors? Superstition. Li Xiu shook his head violently, threw the laser device back into the box, stood up and wiped his face. The awkwardness of peeing made him blush, but he hardened up. Miss Yi, is your grandfather telling stories to scare people? We have science, Lin Fan has proved it. The crawling sounds are insects, the corpses are mummies that expand and contract with heat, and the walls are earthquakes. Chu Tian is late, we will go out on our own. His tone was urgent, and he glanced around, trying to regain the pride of an engineer, but he couldn't hide the panic hidden in his eyes. At this moment, the crawling sound deep in the floor started again. At first it was like drizzle, but it turned into a storm in an instant. The scratches were like thousands of needles piercing the bones, erupting from all directions. The black claws no longer retreated, but crazily poured out of the cracks, covered with purple-black pus, and the sharp finger bones were hung with residual flesh. They flashed with phosphorescence and went straight to the ankles. The rotten smell of sulfur bursts out, mixed with the sweetness of fresh blood, and the air is as stagnant as glue. Although the wall was paused, it creaked faintly from the side passage, and the shadow of the ghost hand stretched out again, with a low roar and wet footsteps approaching, accompanied by the muffled ringing of the bell, which made the torches and sparks fly. Lin Fan nodded, put the flashlight over his shoulder, inserted the dagger back into his waist, and smelled something strange in his nose. There was a faint increase in blood under the mummy's robe. Yes, hold on steady first. Measure the distance to confirm the passage and find the exit. He squatted down and pried dry the corner of the corpse's robe, revealing a jade plaque inside with shimmering runes. He pieced together the clues in his mind, ignoring Li Xiu's breathing and Yi Ji's gaze. Here they come again. Bugs, no, claws. There are more of them. Li Xiu's laser fell to the ground and the screen shattered. His face turned as white as paper, his eyes widened, and his mouth twisted and screamed, science doesn't work. The earthquake is still crawling after it stops. Lin Fan, you are wrong. We are dead. Fear like a flood bursting, he collapsed and shouted. He turned around with his hands on his head and ran wildly. He broke through the crack in the stone on the side. The narrow crack was originally a shadow in the corner of the wall, and instantly expanded like a living mouth. The sticky soles of his shoes slid in, and his but scraped the floor, leaving long marks. He started urinating again, and his screams echoed, "Save me! Don't let them catch me! Li Xiu! Stop running!" Lin Fan growled, grabbed the construction shovel and rushed after him. The torch swayed in Yiji's hand. Her beautiful eyes widened in fear, and she followed closely, with green light flashing from the broken jade. He entered a side road. "That is a forbidden road," Grandpa said, "the nest of resentful spirits." Her voice was sharp, and her nails scratched Lin Fan's arm. Blood beads oozed out, burning and stinging. The side passage was as narrow as an intestine, the wall flesh was squirming, and there was a faint green light. The flashlight flashed randomly and illuminated Li Xiu's back. He had rushed 10 meters away, and the floor suddenly cracked. Countless pale arms burst out from the cracks, like rotten tree roots. The skin is chapped and covered with pus, the finger bones are broken but the strength is infinite, the phosphorus fire eye sockets blink deep, let out a low roar, and a fishy wind blows on the face. Those arms were not insect claws, but the hands of half-rotten vengeful spirits. They grabbed Li Xiu's calves and tore open his trousers. Blood spattered on the wall and sizzled and corroded. "Ah ah! Hands! Catch me with the broken hands! Lin Fan, shovel them!" Li Xiu's screams were deafening. He rolled on the ground, engineering boxes scattered, laser shards flying, his hands slapping his arms wildly, but they were entangled by more pale ghost hands, 10, 20, their joints locked together, and they were dragged towards the abyss of the fissure. There was a crisp sound of tearing flesh and blood, accompanied by the impact of rust and blood in the nasal cavity. His nails dug into the wall and drew white marks. His face was twisted into a ghost, with nosebleeds and tears flowing wildly. "It hurts. They have bitten into the bones. Yiji, help me. This is not a bug, it is a ghost." Yiji rushed to the edge, her beautiful face was pale and desperate, the torch was smashed down and one arm was burned, but the ghost hand did not retreat, the phosphorus eyes blinked, exuding the sweet stench of rotten flesh. She screamed and backed away, and bumped into Lin Fan's arms, her slim body trembling like a sieve. "Too many. The nest of resentful spirits, they are awake." Lin Fan smashed the shovel blade wildly, with a series of clanging clangs, breaking several arms, flying broken fingers, and burning pus on his boots. But he saw that Li Xiu's waist had been dragged in, the crack expanded like a huge mouth, and the black shadow underneath was squirming and crawling like thunder. "Hold on." He stretched out his hand to pull Li Xiu's collar, but heard a click. Li Xiu's arm was broken, his screams turned into blood bubbles, and the ghost hands were victorious and dragged into the ground. The crack closed, leaving only a pool of blood flowing out. 2 severed fingers were floating, the pale nails were still twitching, and the knuckles were bent like hooks. The blood was mixed with nosebleeds and urine, and the fishy smell hit the nostrils. Li Xiu's last scream echoed in the side streets, turning into a wet dragging sound that gradually faded away, leaving only the never-ending clicking of chewing under the floor, like bones being crushed and marrow fluid squeezed out. The air solidified, the sparks of the torch reflected in the pool of blood, and the wall ghost's hand stretched out and swayed mockingly. Yiji sat paralyzed beside a pool of blood. Danfeng's eyes widened and burst into tears, her beautiful eyes reflected the blood, her chest heaved like a bellows, her voice was hoarse and trembling. "Li Xiu is dead. Was he dragged in? Mr. Lin, you broke his arm, but you didn't save him, he still moved after breaking his fingers." This is start," Grandpa said, "the first death at midnight, start the blood sacrifice." She stroked the pool of blood with her delicate hands, her fingertips stained red, her worship collapsed into fear, her dependence was mixed with despair. She stared at Lin Fan, her breath was hot on his arm. "What should we do? The science is wrong, the undead are really awakening." Lin Fan stabbed the dagger into the pool of blood and pried off the floor. The crack reopened, revealing the endless black abyss underneath, blood stains, deep in the severed finger, faint phosphorus fire flickered, and the crawling sound came like a tide, even more fierce. He slammed the floor, stood up, and glanced ahead with calm eyes. The stone door of the forbidden area slowly opened, the green light was shining brightly, like a ghost's eyes opening. A low chuckle penetrated his brain, the putrid hot air spurted out, and the bell rang again, shocking the soul. Lin Fan's engineering shovel blade embedded itself in the gravel splashed with blood, and with a clang, he forcibly opened the closed cracks in the floor. The black abyss below gushed out thicker rusty blood, and the sticky sweet smell mixed with the squeezed bone marrow went straight into the nose like a hook. He closed the cover fiercely, and Yi Ji trembled with a crisp sound. Her beautiful eyes were fixed on the twitching severed finger, and tears mixed with blood slid down her cheeks. Danfeng's eyes were wide open as if she had seen a ghost, her chest heaved violently, her clothes were soaked with sweat, and her seductive curves were exposed, but they were distorted into a desperate outline by the shadow. Li Xiu. I heard his heartbeat. Click, 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 it's not the end, they are eating alive. Her voice was as hoarse as the wind blowing against a tombstone, and her fingertips dug into Lin Fan's arm flesh, drawing new blood marks. The hot stinging mixed with her cold body temperature. Mr. Lin, the stone door is open, and there is something smiling in the green light. Should we go in? Or should we wait to die? The wall ghost's hand is about to touch it. The sound of the walls creaking and grinding was like thousands of ghosts devouring themselves. The shadows of ghost hands stretched out from the cracks in the stone on the side. The phosphorus fire fingertips blinked and grabbed the backs of the two people's necks. The rotten flesh fragments were scattered. The fishy wind blew against their faces and carried sulfur that burned their lungs. The crawling sounds under the floor gathered together like thunder, the rhythm of the rattling bone claws scraping bones accelerated, and black and gray bone powder spurted out from the gaps, making the throat burn. Lin Fan roared and grabbed Yi Ji's waist. The dagger shone coldly and cut off an approaching ghost hand. The severed finger spattered with pus and burned his face. He wiped away the blood and glanced at the stone door of the forbidden area. The green light was as bright as a ghost's eyes. The door murmured and laughed into the brain, return, blood sacrifice, eternal life. The muffled ringing of the bell shocked the soul, and the putrid heat breathed out like the breath of a living corpse. Come in. Lin Fan smashed the gravel beside the door with a shovel, causing sparks from the torch to fly, and dragged Yi Ji into the core tomb chamber. The air behind the stone door was as stagnant as glue, and the rotten stench rushed into the nose, like the sweet and disgusting smell of thousands of corpses. It went straight to the forehead and made the stomach acid churning. The tomb is as vast as an underground hall, with dripping dome and sonorous sound. The walls pulsate like the heart of a giant beast. The gray and black stone flesh slowly squirms, veins bulge like blood vessels, and new passages are squeezed out by crunching and shifting. The gravel rolls down and hurts the insteps. The phosphorus fire faintly lit up the cracks in the wall, reflecting countless reliefs, twisted human faces wailing, skeletal hands praying, and a jade coffin stood on the central stone platform. The lid of the coffin was half lifted, and the dark shadows inside were squirming and whispering faintly. Yi Ji stumbled to the ground, her beautiful face as pale as porcelain. She held the torch high to illuminate the pulsating wall. Her red eyes were wide with fear, her pupils reflected the squirming veins, her delicate hands tightly grasped Lin Fan's sleeves, her nails embedded in the fabric. This is the core tomb of the magician. Grandpa has a taboo, saying that the wall will eat people if it is alive, and the road will be blocked if it is moved. We are lost. It's over. Her breathing was like a bellows, and the fragrant sweat slid down her neck into her collar. The fire stretched her trembling curves, admiration mixed with despair. Mr. Lin, what's your scientific explanation? This heartbeat, the wall is beating. Li Xiu's chewing sound is coming from over there. She pointed to a newly opened passage, where the cracking of bones echoed, and the blood was thicker. Lin Fan threw off his sleeves and took out the rolled climbing rope from Li Xiu's scattered toolbox. He cut a section with a dagger. The rotten smell in his nose made him dizzy. He scanned the tomb chamber with calm eyes, marked the route. The wall movement is the thermal expansion of the earth, and the pulsation like the heart is the circulation of hot air. The ancients designed to prevent collapse. Knots are every 5 meters, and the red dye is conspicuous. He quickly tied the first knot on the stone door frame, straightened the red rope and penetrated into the new passage. His flashlight holder swept across the wall, new runes appeared. Twisted blood-red lines swam like living snakes, densely packed with ancient seal scripts. My magician, Xian Mingzi, sacrifices blood to hundreds of spirits and performs the magic of resurrection. The Yin energy gathers at midnight, the veins of the corpses jump again, the nest of resentful spirits opens, the servants wake up, the flesh of the wall moves into the palace, and the sacrificer is introduced into the belly. Only by guarding the bloodline and offering the jade soul can the eternal life be reversed. The runes pulsed, and the green light erupted from the residual jade pendant of Yi Ji, resonating, buzzing and humming like an insect eating the brain. The walls creaked again, ghost hands approached, roars and wet drags from the depths, and the maze awakened more intensely. Lin Fan grabbed Yi Ji's arm and pulled her back. The construction shovel flashed with cold light, knowing that Li Xiu's death was just the tip of the iceberg, and the evil spirit of the magician was approaching. The unknown fear is like a tide, swallowing everything. Lin Fan lightly scratched the edge of the rune with his dagger, testing that the pulse slowed down, and he pieced together clues in his mind. Resurrection. The magician wants to die, and sacrifices blood to the resentful spirits to build a maze, which opens at midnight. Li Xiu's death is not the end, but the beginning of the blood sacrifice. The core of the resurrection technique, corpse veins are connected to underground hot springs. Resentful spirits are not ghosts, but parasites that control mummies. Guarding the bloodline is the key, your jade pendant. He looked directly at Yi Ji, her beautiful eyes flickered to avoid it, and her slender lips bit the bloody thread. Don't ask. Just give me guidance. Rite passage. Lin Fan nodded, pulled the rope and moved forward, with the shovel blade on guard, smelling the rotten smell intensifying, mixed with the sweetness of blood. The passage is as narrow as an intestine, and the flesh of the wall squirms and squeezes. The red rope rubs against the stone flesh and makes a sticky rustling sound. Bones crunch under the footsteps, and the flashlight shines wildly on the cracks in the wall and flickers of phosphorus fire. Suddenly, the first wave of undead broke out. The cracks in the wall exploded, and half-rotten corpses crawled out, the skin was chapped and covered with pus, the phosphorus-fired eye sockets were sunken and whirling, the broken teeth were dripping with black juice, the bone arms were stretched like hooks, and the fishy wind blew against the face, mixed with the sweetness of rust and rot, and rushed into the throat to retching. The corpse roared and was dragged wet, its claws clawed at Lin Fan's back, and pus splashed on the ironing clothes. Back there. Corpse, half-rotten. Yi Ji screamed, her beautiful eyes glaring with fear. She swung the torch and hit the corpse's head. Sparks exploded and burned the rotten flesh, and the stench surged like a charred corpse. She was as slender and agile as a cat. She sidestepped and pounced on Lin Fan. She pushed his waist with her jade hand. The two of them rolled to the ground to avoid the attack of the second corpse's claw. The hook fingers smashed into the wall and stone fragments flew and scratched their faces painfully. Mr. Lin, be careful. They crawl from the wall. Her voice trembled with admiration. Lin Fan's figure was reflected in Dan Feng's eyes. Fragrant sweat splashed on his cheeks. Her chest was undulating close to his arms. You are right about science, but they move. Burn it. Lin Fan stood up, grabbed the torch and stabbed the corpse's eyes wildly. The phosphorus fire exploded and green juice spurted out, burning his palms like acid. He gritted his teeth and roared, hot spring insects are parasitic, fire is weak. The shovel blade swept across, smashing the corpse's arm with a click, the severed limb twitched and rolled, pus and blood splashed on the wall, corroded and smoked. The third half-rotten corpse climbed down from the crack in the ceiling wall, its heart broken and scratching on the floor, spitting out bone residue in its mouth, and clawing at the back of Yi Ji's neck. Her beautiful eyes widened in despair. The torch fell and sparks flew around. Lin Fan was unable to save her. Yi Jiu kicked her leg, and her slender foot hit the corpse's cheek. The bones cracked and cracked. The corpse's head tilted and hit the wall. She picked up the torch and stabbed the corpse's mouth. Black juice spurted out and burned her arms, but she did not retreat. She screamed, "Get away!" Grandpa taught, Ham. Her skills were extremely agile, her beautiful eyes shone with a secret light, and her sweat dripped in her clothes, which was alluring, but she was twisted by fear. Yiji's beautiful eyes suddenly shrank, and her face turned pale as if she had seen a taboo. She hurriedly looked away, lowering her torch to hide it. This. Grandpa Rune mentioned that the resurrection technique is a rumor, don't believe it. Let's take this passage, the exit is on the right, probably. Her voice was vague and trembling, her fingertips touched the broken jade, and the green light shone wildly, reflecting the dodge in her eyes, and the fragrant sweat dripped on the stone, as if she was hiding something deeper. Hurry up and tie the rope, Mr. Lin, do you understand? Blood is needed to reverse the situation. Your good hands are scary. At the end of the passage, Li Xiu's engineering box overturned, the laser rangefinder screen shattered and flashed, and the heartbeat monitor next to him buzzed. The red line jumped wildly. It shows a weak signal, coming from deep underground, and the sound of chewing is in perfect rhythm. Lin Fan picked up the instrument, and the screen data flashed randomly, heart rate 35, location 50 meters downward, accompanied by an abnormal magnetic field peak. The blood in the nose worsened, and Li Xiu's urine was mixed with residue. Li Xiu is still alive. The instrument confirmed that the heartbeat is beating. There is a heat source deep down. His cold eyes flashed, and he tied a new knot, and the flashlight illuminated the instrument to point to a fork in the road. The flesh of the wall pulsed and squeezed, and the passage behind the red rope slowly closed, crunching like a giant mouth swallowing it. Lin Fan's shovel blade touched up the knife and pierced the corpse's chest. The insects inside exploded and fled. He gasped and stood still. His flashlight swept across the remains of the 3 corpses. The phosphorus fire dimmed, leaving only twitching and gut-wrenching movements. Yi Ji threw herself into his arms, her beautiful face pale and panting. Danfeng's eyes widened with admiration. Mr. Lin, your torch and shovel blade are amazing. You smashed the insect swarms, but you haven't seen my leg skills, have you? Grandpa passed it on to prevent graveyards. She said vaguely, touching the blood marks on his arms with her fingertips, and her breath was hot on her cheeks. They are weak in fire, but there are more. Listen, the crawling sound is approaching. Yi Ji's beautiful eyes were fixed on the instrument, her face suddenly turned fearful, and she pulled Lin Fan with trembling hands. Heartbeat? Li Xiu is still beating after being eaten. The magician's resurrection technique. Grandpa said that the first death will be sacrificed, the corpse veins will absorb the soul, and become a half-rotten servant. We can't go down, that's the heart of the nest. Her voice was shrill and trembling, her sweat dripping violently, and the torch reflected the blood-red instrument light. Mr. Lin, you believe in science, but this, living heart is beating underground. Which way to choose? The wall behind is closed. The crawling sound on the floor suddenly turned into a huge wave. Crack, click, click, like thousands of troops galloping, gathering from all sides. Cracks in the wall exploded, black claws surged, phosphorus fire eyes blinked, and the bloody and rotten air condensed into gel. The walls all pulsed faster, and there was only one dead end in the new passage. The fork in the abyss pointed by the instrument. The green light flickered, and the whispering laughter returned. Blood sacrifice, return, eternal life. The roar of the bell shook the bone marrow. The black shadow of the jade coffin on the stone platform sat up, and the rotten hand knocked on the lid of the coffin, as if summoning something more terrifying. Lin Fan's engineering shovel blade scraped the ground with a harsh scratch. Sparks splashed and illuminated the edge of the dead-end abyss. Hot air surged up like corpse's breath, and the rotten sweetness mixed with sulfur went straight into the nose, making the stomach twist and make people vomit. He pulled Yiji's slim waist tightly, and the red light of the instrument flashed wildly on her pale face. Her beautiful eyes were wide open with fear, and the pupils of her red phoenix eyes shrank into needlepoints. Staring at the closed wall behind her, there was a loud crunching sound like a beast swallowing, the red rope snapped and shattered, and stone chips rolled down and hurt her ankles, cutting off all escape routes. "Mr. Lin, the heart of the nest." Grandpa said it was the heart of a warlock. "It beats and summons all the undead in the cemetery. We are finished." Her voice was shrill and trembling, sweat dripping down her neck and sliding into her collar. The torch was held high and swung to lengthen her undulating curves. She collapsed in despair while worshipping him. Her fingertips dug into his arm flesh and drew bloody marks. The hot stinging mixed with her cold body temperature. The sound of crawling on the floor was like a surging tide, the rhythm of the rattling bone claws scraping bones merged into thunder, black ash and bone powder burst out from the gaps in the four walls, choking and burning the throat, and the smell of blood and rust condensed into gelatin and stuck to the lips. The pulsation of the flesh of the wall at the rear accelerated, veins bulged like a python swimming around, new cracks exploded, a half-rotted head with blinking eye sockets poked out, black pus gurgled from the mouth with broken teeth, extended hooks and claws grabbed the air, causing wet and sticky tears, and the fishy wind blew against the back and burned the clothes. "They are catching up." Li Xiu's heartbeat, the instrument said 50 meters, but this heat wave seems to be alive and breathing. Yi Ji screamed, her beautiful eyes glaring back, and the torch slammed into one of the phosphorus eyes. The green juice splashed and burned the back of her hand and smoked. She screamed in pain and flung herself at Lin Fan's chest. Her chest heaved violently and pressed against his arm, and the fragrant sweat splashed on his cheeks and mixed with blood. "Mr. Lin, what about science? What should I do?" "Smash the floor." Grandpa said to postpone the recruitment. Lin Fan's cold eyes flashed, and the instrument data jumped wildly. The heart rate rose to 42, the peak value of the magnetic field exploded, and the hot springs in the depths were boiling. He roared and threw away the torch, causing sparks to fly. "Stones seal the cracks. The parasites are afraid of earthquakes and break the wall veins." He bent down and picked up an arm of rough tomb bricks. His muscles bulged and veins popped out. The back of the shovel blade was alert, and he slammed it into the cracks in the floor, clang. The stone bricks were embedded in the black abyss, the crackling bones echoed, and the waves crawling underneath felt like being choked. The phosphorus eyes blinked and disrupted the rhythm. The black claws retreated and rustled away, pausing for half a breath. Yi Jimei's beautiful eyes suddenly shrank, Danfeng's eyes widened in shock and admiration. One brick shook the tide. "Mr. Lin, you are amazing. But the wall is moving, and new seams are opening." She hurriedly picked up broken bricks and smashed them, waving her slender arms and sweat splashing, her jade legs flying to make up for it. Her vaginal hem smashed a probe hook in the howling wind, and her severed finger spattered with pus and blood, sizzling on the ground. "Run. The heart of the nest is close, the heat is scalding your lungs." The two people retreated while smashing. The dead end was as narrow as the tightening of the intestines, the flesh of the wall squirmed and squeezed the red rope stumps and rubbed sticky, the bones crunched under their footsteps, the flashlight beams swayed randomly and illuminated the reliefs in the cracks in the wall, twisted human faces wailing and praying with bone hands, green light pulsating like runes and snakes swimming away. The crawling sound returned even more violently, like thousands of insects gnawing at the bones, shaking from the soles of the feet to the knees. The rotten smell in the nose surged and mixed with the residue of Li Xiu's urine, indicating that the blood sacrifice in the depths was intensifying. Lin Fan pulled Yi Ji past a hanging broken intestine, which twitched and squirted black juice, scalding his face. He wiped away the blood and pieced it together in a calm mind. The runes recorded, the flesh of the wall moves the palace to lead the sacrifice into the belly. The rules are like the veins of a maze, the evil spirit of the magician controls the hot springs to parasitize, and the heart of the nest is the core. "Hold on." The instrument points to the left bend, mark. He carved an arrow into the wall with his dagger, tied a stone brick to the end of the red rope and threw it into the abyss to explore the path, and the plumb bob sank with a gurgling sound. Suddenly, there was a flash of light ahead, and a pale figure huddled in the heat, a girl. She was curled up in a corner like a corpse, her skin was sallow and bloodless, her long hair was messy and sticky with sweat, her eyes were sunken but she blinked smartly, her body was wrapped in rags, revealing phosphorus burn marks on her arms, and her breath was as weak as a broken candle. Lin Fan's flashlight was shining directly on her. She raised her head and her pale lips trembled. Don't smash it. Water, give me water. I've been trapped for 3 days. The cemetery eats people. The walls move as regularly as runes. Her voice was hoarse like the wind blowing on dry bones. She held out a trembling hand to hold a half-empty bottle of mineral water and a crumpled map fragment. The edge of the paper was corroded and stained with blood. The water droplets dripped onto the rocks and evaporated, giving off a cool and refreshing rust to save her life. Yijime's eyes widened with vigilance, Danfeng's eyes narrowed into slits, she pulled Lin Fan's sleeves and took half a step back, raising the torch high to illuminate the girl's face. Who are you? A cemetery survivor? 3 days of immortality? What the hell? Grandpa said there are no survivors in the maze, get out of here. His voice was shrill and frightening, sweat rolled down his spine, his chest rose and fell against Lin Fan's arm, and his jade hand secretly held the broken jade pendant with green light shining slightly. Mr. Lin, don't believe it. She is as pale as a corpse, with burn marks and the smell of phosphorus. She may be a servant. The girl Mushue, he announced his name, his pale lips curved into a wry smile, and the fragments of the map shook open and reflected in the light of his flashlight, twisted lines and runes, marking the path of the wall moving like a living snake. I am Mu Shui, an orphan girl at the end of the village. I searched for my father at night, and survived by dripping water for 3 days. Look at the map, the wall moved along the blood-red line of the rune, it was not chaos. The evil magician Xian Mingzi controlled the hot spring, pulsating to open the nest at midnight, and the servants crawled through the cracks. She pointed to the corner of the fragment, and the blood-red rune matched the core tomb talisman in Lin Fan's mind. The veins of the corpse jumped again, and the flesh of the wall moved into the palace. Lin Fan glanced at the map with cold eyes, and compared it with the wall relief with the dagger. The pulsating veins indeed followed the path of the runes, and the flashlight data coincided with the peak value of the magnetic field of the instrument. True. The resentful spirit is not a ghost, the parasite network controls the flesh of the wall, the rules are broken. Go against the bloodline of the rune, avoid the nest heart. He took the water bottle and drank it wildly, and poured the cold water down his throat to extinguish the fire. The puzzle in his mind was complete, the heat source deep in Li Xiu's heartbeat, the blood sacrifice of the first dead servant, and Mu Shui's map pointed directly to the exit. He threw the water bottle to Yi Ji, and climbed the waves behind him with the shovel blade. Alliance. If the 3 of you leave, the marks will be doubled. Yi Ji's beautiful eyes flickered with hesitation, while Danfeng stared at Mushue's pale neck, biting her lip and murmuring, okay, but you first explore the path to prove it's not a corpse. She gasped for water, and turned to Lin Fan with adoring eyes. Mr. Lin, you are so fast. Scientifically deciphering runes. But her eyes are hiding something. Mushue stood up tremblingly, her pale slender legs crunching on bones, and she led the charge along the blood line on the map. She illuminated the entrance of the new tomb with her flashlight, the flesh of the wall slowly opened like a huge mouthful of breath, and hot air sprayed onto her face, sweet with sulfur and rot. The 3 people flashed in, and the tomb was as wide as a blood pool palace. The dome was dripping with clanging blood, the shallow pits on the floor were filled with pus and blood reflecting phosphorus fire, and the wall reliefs were activated, human faces were distorted and growling, and bone hands stretched out to grab the air and snap. The central stone altar was broken into pieces, and jade fragments scattered with green light, like the remains of a jade coffin. The sound of crawling followed and approached, rattling like a tide against the flesh of the outer wall of the door, causing stone powder to scatter and choke the lungs. Mu Shui threw herself at the stone altar to retrieve the jade pieces, her pale face shimmering with green light, this, guardian talisman fragment. The key to eternal life in the cemetery, Xian Mingzi's blood sacrifice to pray for immortality, and the guardian blood sacrifice to reverse the reversal of death. She raised her head suddenly, staring at the jade pendant on Yiji's neck, her deep-set eyes were filled with shock. You, necklace. It's the same as this. Blood-red stripe, guardian talisman. Are you a descendant? Her voice trembled like a ghost, her pale fingertip stabbed Yiji's chest, map fragments fell and splashed with pus and blood. It is said in the village that the Yi family has guarded the tomb for 3 generations, your grandfather has a taboo, the blood sacrifice needs you. Yi Jimei's eyes suddenly shrank and widened in fear, her red phoenix eyes dodged away, her delicate hands hurriedly covered the jade's green light that was flashing and humming, her face was as white as porcelain as she was sweating violently. Nonsense. This, family heirloom jade is ordinary. Grandpa is superstitious and has nothing to do with the cemetery. Her voice was fuzzy and trembling, her chest heaved violently, her curves were distorted, and her jade legs were slightly. He pushed back against Lin Fan's arm, hot breath spraying on his cheeks in despair. Mr. Lin, don't listen. She's a trap, Mushue's eyes are ghostly, let's walk the line of blood. But the green light resonated with the jade pieces on the stone altar, buzzing like insects eating. The muffled ringing of the bell outside the wall shook the soul, the waves crashed and creaked, the door walls slowly closed, and the newly seamed phosphorescent eyes blinked in. Lin Fan's cold eyes flickered, the instrument's heart rate was beating wildly at 48, Li Xiu's signal was only 30 meters away, and the alarm bells in his head were, guardian of the bloodline. Yi Ji's concealment intensified, and Mu Shui's origins were in doubt. The dagger scratched the wall and the pulse of the new talisman test slowed down. He roared and pulled the 2 of them, seal the door first. After the jade talisman was reversed, he said, the heart of the nest is approaching, the second wave of blood sacrifice. The shovel blade hit the edge of the stone altar, broken jade splashed with green light and exploded, temporarily suppressing the crawling sound. Yi Ji's beautiful eyes were filled with admiration but she dodged. Shui Bai's lips clenched tightly, and the 3 of them were on guard back to back. Deep in the new tomb, whispers and laughter reappeared, bloodline, sacrifice, eternal life. The hot springs were boiling and gurgling, and black claws were spraying from the cracks in the floor. An unknown crisis was quietly approaching, indicating that Li Xiusheng's servants were about to appear. Mu Xue picked up the fragments of the map and said Lin Fanhui, with trembling pale hands, pointed deep and said, bloodline right, avoid the nest. But the guardian talisman, she hid it, we are dead. Yi Ji screamed and retorted, shut up. Mr. Lin, believe me. The sparks from the torch were flying randomly and illuminated the shadows of 3 faces. In the game of mutual suspicion, the flesh of the wall was pulsing, and the bells were ringing to summon something more terrifying. The underground hot springs were a sign of explosion, and the heart of the resentful spirit's nest opened its bloody mouth. Lin Fan tied a new knot on the red rope, pulled the 2 of them to the blood line, and scanned Mushue's burn marks with his flashlight. They were not phosphorus fire, but rune engravings, a foreshadowing buried deep, laying the groundwork for the subsequent blood sacrifice crisis. The crawling sound returned to madness, the clicking sound was like a 10,000 army. The sweet smell of blood intensified, Li Xiu's chewing reverberated close at hand, the bond between the 3 of them was as fragile as thin ice, and they rushed into the abyss of the unknown tomb. Lin Fan stepped hard on the shallow pool of blood. Pus and blood spattered and hit his ankles. The sweet and fishy rust rushed straight into his nose, like swallowing pig iron. The bone residue on the soles of his feet cracked and reverberated. The sound of waves climbing outside the wall made a loud crunching sound that made blood droplets clang on the dome and hit his shoulders. Mu Xue's pale figure took the lead and turned right to the blood line. The flashlight beam swept across the depths of the forked road, the narrow intestinal passage. The veins in the wall pulsated slowly like a python's belly breathing. The phosphorus fire eyes blinked and peered into the new gap. The hot air sprayed thinly with sulfur and putrid smell in the face and choked the lungs. He growled and tightened the end of the red rope. Seal the back. Smash the stone to block the opening and take a breath. The construction shovel blade whizzed down and fell with his backhand. The tomb bricks embedded in the cracks of the door and cracked black claws. The crawling sound underneath suddenly became like being cut off by iron tongs, and was temporarily reduced to sporadic rustling. The blood in his nose faded for half a breath. The three of them gasped and threw themselves in the corner. Yijimei's eyes were wide open with fear. Danfeng stared at the phosphorescent light as she closed the crack of the door. The fragrant sweat flowed down her neck and slid into the collar, soaking the curves of her clothes. She slapped Lin Fan's arm and chest with hot breath on her cheeks. Mr. Lin blocked it. But Li Xiu chewed. The sound of chewing was approaching, the heat source was 30 meters away, the heartbeat was 48. He turned into something and was chasing me. Her voice was sharp and trembling, her fingertips dug at his arm flesh and drew red marks. Sparks from the torch flew around and illuminated her pale face with admiration and despair. Her legs curled up and rubbed against his knees, her cold body temperature mixed with her fragrant sweat and salty moisture. Mushua crouched against the remains of the stone altar, her pale lips panting like the wind blowing against dead bones. Her deep-set eyes scanned the emerald jade pieces, and the runes on her arms with burned scars flickered. The bloodline is stable, 3 breaths are safe. Drink water, take stock, or you will all die. She handed over the half-empty water bottle with trembling hands, and the drops of pus and blood nourished and evaporated. The rust was cool and life-saving. Lin Fan poured it down to extinguish the fire in his throat, and the cold water ran down his esophagus to extinguish the sulfur fumigation. Lin Fan's cold eyes flashed, and the red light of the instrument reflected on his face. The data was stable, heart rate 42, magnetic field peak value dropped, and Li Xiu's signal card 30 meters away echoed like chewing bone marrow. He threw the water bottle to Yi Ji, cut open the fragments of Mushua's map with the dagger and compared it with the wall relief. The blood-red runes were consistent. Harvest, 3 pieces of jade, the green light resonates with your pendant, the guardian talisman. The reverse bloodline is stable, the red rope is marked 50 meters, no loop. He picked up the broken jade from the stone altar, and his muscles bulged and veins popped out. His fingertips rubbed the edges, and the green light buzzed like insects. He pieced together the magician's resurrection method in his mind: blood sacrifice, gathering yin energy, corpse veins, jumping into the nest, and awakening the servants. Yijimei's beautiful eyes suddenly shrank and she stared in admiration. Danfeng's eyes widened and she trembled. Mr. Lin. God. 3 pieces of jade to make 1. Instrument plus map plus runes, you can solve the maze scientifically. My grandfather's superstitions are all correct. She hurriedly approached and handed over the broken jade pendant with a green glow. Flash resonance, fragrant sweat splattered on the back of his hand, his chest heaved and he murmured against his arm, but I'm sorry for hiding it, it's a family tradition of pendants, and it's taboo for Grandpa. Mu Shui's pale face reflected the green light, and her deep-set eyes were shocked. Spell. Reversal of the blood sacrifice, a way to survive. In the brief silence, Mu Shui's pale lips curled up into a bitter smile, and her hoarse voice sounded like the friction of dead bones. Listen, to the history of the cemetery. The 1,000-year-old Xian Mingzi, a sorcerer seeking immortality, sacrificed his blood to the villagers to build a maze. At midnight, the Yin Qi gathered, and his corpse's veins jumped again, controlled the wall and moved his flesh to the palace to eat the sacrifice. The half-decomposed servant crawled from the cracks. The guardian of the Murano family, 3 generations of jade souls sealed him. Look! She pointed at the wall relief. The green light jade pieces were humming and bubbling, the veins on the wall were bulging and the pulsation was accelerating, and the relief was distorted. The human face comes alive and roars, the skeletal hands stretch out and grab the air, and the illusion explodes like blood mist. In the green light of phosphorus fire, Xian Mingzi's black-robed and skinny figure sits cross-legged on the jade coffin, blood-red runes swim around his eyes, servants kneel around him and lick the black claws, and the hot spring bursts and sprays the veins of the corpse wrapped in vines. He laughed wildly and whispered, "Eternal life." Suddenly, the white-robed guardian rushed in. The jade sword beheaded him and the green light exploded to seal the coffin lid. The wraith screamed and distorted the whole pulse of the cemetery. The flesh of the wall devoured half of the guardian's body. The illusion shattered and the blood mist surged. Yijimei's eyes widened with fear, her red phoenix eyes shrank to a pinpoint, and she stared at the afterimage of the illusion and trembled at Lin Fan. "Grandpa, that white robe. Ye family ancestors, the midnight ceremony to seal Xian Mingzi. I know. I'm afraid you'll abandon me if I hide it." Grandpa said that the descendants' blood jade sacrifice is reversed, but the blood sacrifice is close. "I'm sorry." Her voice broke and shrilled, her face was white with sweat, and her slender waist was twisted. Lin Fan's arms were bloody and hot, his jade legs were curled up tightly and his chest was pressed tightly with heat and despair. "Mr. Lin, trust me. A pendant offering a soul can seal the heart of the nest, but it needs to go into the core." Mu Shui clenched her pale lips tightly and her deep-set eyes flashed with suspicion. "The descendant, the blood sacrifice needs you. Grandpa is forbidden to hide this." She poked Yiji's neck and the jade green light flashed wildly. Lin Fan's cold eyes were unwavering, alarm bells in his mind, guardian bloodline foreshadowing. Yiji concealed the confirmation, Mushua's burn mark runes matched and he was not a servant. He growled and took the piece of jade into his arms. "Confess well." The talisman gate, the blood-red core talisman at the end of the intestinal tract ahead, reversed the strokes to open the way. The three of them gasped and stood up, tied the red rope around their waists and rushed forward along the bloodline. The flashlight scanned the depths of the branch road, the wall flesh squirmed and squeezed as if the throat was tightened, the floor was cracked and black ash bone powder was sprayed into the throat, and the phosphorus fire eyes blinked and dripped black pus and scalded the ground. The stone gate stands at the end, with blood-red runes swimming like living snakes, and pieces of green light jade buzzing towards the buzzing brain. Lin Fan lightly drew the dagger to compare the map, and his bulging muscles filled in the reverse strokes with his fingertips. Reverse bloodline, cut off at the top, seal at the bottom. Click. The runes suddenly stopped pulsing, the stone door slowly opened, and the heat wave sprayed on the face, and the rotten smell of zombies breathed into the face, and the nose was burning and the stomach was twisted. As soon as the door opened, unknown fear broke out, the floor cracked and thunder roared, black claws surged like thousands of insects eating bones, and undead reptiles burst out. The half-rotten mummy's servants stretched out their hooks and claws, the phosphorus fire eye sockets blinked with green light, and the broken teeth blinked and the mouth dripped with pus. Dozens of heads crawled from the gaps and piled up. The joints rubbed against each other and rustled and thundered. The reptiles are released. Talisman guards. Mushua screamed, her pale face twisted, her sunken eyes widened with fear and she threw herself at the corner, her arms trembling with burn scars. Second wave of blood sacrifice. Li Xiu takes the lead. The heat source in front exploded, and Li Xiu's broken body appeared. Body, a half-rotten engineer, his chest was torn and exposed, his heart was beating 48 times, his intestines were slapping and twitching on the floor, his eye sockets were staring at Lin Fan with phosphorus fire, echoing as he chewed the raw bones. The red line of the broken instrument in his hand flashed wildly, and the remains of urine mixed with pus and blood hit his nose. Overwhelmed with despair, Yijimei's eyes widened and she collapsed and screamed, "Li Xiu, monster! Mr. Lin, we are finished. The reptile bites the leg, ah!" A hooked claw grabbed her jade ankle and tore the flesh and blood. She screamed in pain and hit Lin Fan's chest. The fragrance of sweat splashed on her face. She smashed the torch with the green juice and the back of her hand shivered. "Where's the science?" The door opened backfired. "Hiding it will harm you." Mu Shui's pale body she curled up in cracked bones. "I, Yin energy. Freeze them. She sunk in her eyes and closed her burned scars, the runes exploded with green light, the pale palms slapped the ground, the wind howled, the blood pools of pus and blood frosted, freezing the reptiles in the front row, the black claws stiffened and shattered, and the servants' movements faltered and the phosphorus fire blinked wildly. It works, but Li Xiu's heartbeat doesn't stop. Her voice was hoarse and frightened, and the frosty cold mixed with the rotten stink in her nose was pungent. Lin Fan's cold eyes flashed with murderous intent, and the engineering shovel blade mopped the ground, sparks splashed and illuminated the tide trap. The torch lit the phosphorus eyes, shaking the tide. Wanting to suppress the limit, the pattern flashed in his mind: Fuman release guard backlash, fire weak parasite. He tied the red rope to Yi Ji's waist and yanked it off the hook. The shovel blade whizzed and hit Li Xiu's chest, tsang. His heart flew out and his blood pooled, and hot blood spurted out of his face, burning the rust. But he struck back with his claws and claws, tearing the flesh and blood from his arms. Lin Fan grunted and took 3 steps back, bleeding heavily from his arms. Yi Jime's eyes suddenly shrank, her eyes widened in shock and admiration. Mr. Lin, can't you die if you break your heart? God! The ancestral dagger. She pulled out the hidden jade dagger from her neck with green light, and the Yin Ham Ham howled in the wind and leaped up to chop Li Xiu's leader's neck. Click. Rotted head splashed with black blood, phosphorus fire extinguished the servant tide, and the crawlers froze and shattered. She fell to the ground and gasped, her beautiful eyes full of admiration, and she stared at Lin Fan with admiration. You lead the way, I will behead you, we complement each other. Mr. Lin, invincible. The fragrant sweat splashed on his arms, and the blood marks on his jade legs were trembling but tenacious. Mu Xue's yin energy was exhausted, her face was as white as paper, and her arms were cracked with burn marks, green juice oozing out of blood. Escaped, but seriously injured, there are rustling reptiles left behind. She fell to the ground gasping for breath, her eyes were sunken in pain, and her lungs were choked with frost and rot mixed with blood. The 3 of them leaned against the door, and the stone door slowly opened to the core of the resentful spirit. The abyss hot springs were boiling, the heart of the nest was pulsing with green veins beating like a giant heart, and the muffled sound of the bell shook the soul and whispered, sacrifice, eternal life. Lin Fan scanned the instrument with cold eyes. Li Xiu's signal was off, and his heart rate peaked at 0 meters. Improve strength. The jade talisman can be used to stabilize the whole green light, and can be sealed by reversing the soul. Suddenly, a muffled shout came from the wall outside. Lin Fan. Yi Ji. Chu Tian, I'm late, knock on the door. What the hell is that crawling inside? Open the way. Chu Tian's rough roar pulsed through the wall, and the crunch of the axe echoed the hot air. Yi Jime's eyes widened with surprise and fear. Chu Tian, reinforcements. But the wall can be moved, and the heart of the nest is summoned. Mu Xue's pale lips trembled. He is a blood sacrifice for the 3 of them. The crawling sound rekindled like an army, and the explosion of hot springs was a sign of grunts. Chu Tian's shouts were intermittent and murmured with low laughter. The crisis suddenly rose and the thin ice broke to the edge. The 3 of them looked at each other in despair, and Lin Fan growled, pull him. The counter-talisman rushes to the core. The unknown resentful spirit opened its huge mouth quietly, swallowed by the eternal shadow. The gurgling hot springs are boiling like the throat of a giant beast swallowing, the veins are pulsing and the walls are swelling and contracting. The bell whispers, sacrifice, eternal life. Echoing in the brain like a hammer hitting the skull. Each blow is mixed with sulfur and rotten sweetness and goes straight into the nasal cavity, burning the lungs to spasm. Lin Fan locked his cold eyes on the abyss at the end of the stone door. The green jade talisman buzzed against his chest and was as hot as his heart. He roared and threw the end of the red rope through the crack of the door. Chu Tian. Grab the rope and pull it in. The wall is closed and the black claw is close. The rope whizzed through the air and hit the flesh of the outer wall. The reverberation of the axe was so loud that blood dripped from the dome and clanged on the shoulder. Chu Tian's rough groan came, "I hold on tight. What the hell is the heat wave inside? The crawling sound is like a sea of insects, fuck." The red rope was yanked fiercely, and the green veins on the wall were squirming and squeezing like a giant mouth biting the rope. The cracks in the phosphorus fire eyes blinked and black pus dripped, and the rope was broken. Chu Tian's figure flashed into the door. The axe blade whizzed and cut off the tail. The black claws crunched the bone sand. He rolled on the ground and the hot air sprayed on his face. His thick face was mixed with sweat and blood, and he glanced at the three of them with round eyes. "Lin Fan. Your faces are pale, Mu Shui green juice is dripping on your arms, and Yi Ji's ankles are dripping with blood. Where is Li Xiu? Is the instrument destroyed?" Yi Jimei's beautiful eyes widened with surprise and fear, her red phoenix eyes shrank to a pinpoint, she stared at Chu Tian's axe blade green and sticky with blood, she threw herself at Lin Fan's arm, pressed her hot breath to her cheeks and trembled. "Chu Tian, reinforcements." But the heart of the nest is summoned, and the hot spring gulu bursts. It's a sign that the wall will move and eat people. Her delicate hands dug into Lin Fan's arm flesh and made red marks. Fragrant sweat flowed down her neck and slid into the collar, soaking the curves. The flesh on her legs and ankles curled up in pain and rubbed against his knees. Her cold body temperature mixed with blood and salty wetness, like crying blood. Mu Shui's pale body huddled beside the stone door, green juice oozing out from the cracks in her arms, dripping with frost, her deep-set eyes flashing with pain and hoarseness. "For people, the blood sacrifice is full. Xian Mingzi's pulse is accelerating, and the roving servants are coming." She pointed forward with trembling fingers. In the abyss of the hot spring, phosphorus fire and green light flickered and gathered together to form a tide. The bones of the half-rotted mummy servants rubbed against each other like thousands of insects crawling up the wall. The broken teeth and mouth dripped with pus, and the hooks and claws stretched out to grab the air and echoed. Chu Tian's thick eyes widened in shock. He clenched the handle of the axe tightly and roared with a low growl, "Parade group. I cut off 10 claws with my axe, but this hot spring pulses like a living heart, and the bells whisper and drill into the brain. Lin Fan, where is the science? What the hell is the instrument testing?" He swung the axe and splashed blood on the wall, corroding and smoking. The rotten smell of sulfur in his nose aggravated the burning of his lungs. He leaned on the ground with his thick legs and leaned against Lin Fan's shoulder, panting like an ox. Lin Fan's cold eyes were calm, and the alarm bells were ringing in his head. Chu Tian entered the game to perform a blood sacrifice on 4 people, Mu Shui was seriously injured, Yi Ji was injured and slowed down, and the foreshadowing of the 3 bloods merging into one emerged. He pulled the red rope around his waist, dragging the blade of the engineering shovel across the ground, sparks splashing out and illuminating the green light of the jade talisman. "Avoid the crowd. Yi Ji, protect the knowledge, rune transformation, 3 blood reversal." Yi Ji's beautiful eyes suddenly shrank with admiration mixed with despair, the red phoenix eyes widened and trembled, and she rushed closer to hand over the ancestral jade pendant with a flash of green light. "Mr. Lin. God. Grandpa's taboo, the seal of the nest heart requires the blood of the descendant plus the guardian jade soul plus the blood of the evil spirit to be combined into one, and the reverse bloodline is filled with 3 strokes to open the altar, but you can cruise close and grab the leg with your hook." Her voice broke sharply, and the back of Lin Fan's hand was hot with sweat. Her chest heaved and she murmured in despair, "My bloodline is sacrificed, it's all destroyed." The depths of the cemetery turned into a maze of flesh and blood. The walls were oozing with blood and pulsing like a python's belly, breathing and squeezing. The passage was as narrow as a throat tightening. The cracks in the floor sprayed black bone powder into your throat, mixed with the hot spring steam, burned your face and fogged your face. Lin Fan growled and took the lead to turn right. The flashlight beam swept across the depths of the fork in the road, phosphorus fire eyes surged into the crowd of cruising servants, hundreds of black claw hooks stretched out the limbs and dragged them along with thunderous sounds, and pieces of rotten flesh peeled off and stuck to the ground. Pus and blood merged into a river and rushed to the ankles, which was cold and sticky. The four of them clung to the wall and squirmed forward. Chu Tian's axe guard screamed and slashed, claws clanging and sparks flying. Close. I'm blocking, but my legs are weak and run away. He swung the axe with his thick arm and severed 3 claws. Black blood sprayed out and burned his face. However, his shoulder flesh was torn, blood flowed and the pain was sore. He groaned and retreated, staring wide. Eyes wide with fear, Lin Fan stared at Lin Fan's back. Lin Fan, regularity. These people are endless, peak heat source. Yi Zhiyu's leg and ankle injuries were bloody, and she screamed in pain and moaned with every step, hitting Lin Fan's waist and chest with intense heat and blood. Mr. Lin bit off his ankle, scientific explanation. Grandpa said, the bell rings 3 times, and the phosphorus fire blinks in sync. Mushua clenched her pale lips, her deep-set eyes flashed with suspicion, her burned arms were dripping with green juice, and her yin-chi palm slapped the wall. The cold wind roared, and the frozen phosphorus eyes cracked and shattered. The tide surged, but he exhausted all his strength and coughed up green blood. I can't hold it in. The spirit is divided, the magician's spirit is divided. The source of the burn marks, the soul of Xian Mingzi who has dispersed for thousands of years is sent to me, the clue of the curse, the central altar hides the heart of the resentful spirit, and the heart pulse of the blood sacrifice wakes up again. After Mushua's words fell, everyone's footsteps froze and despaired. Yi Zhimei's eyes widened with fear, and she screamed at Lin Fanhui, Spirit. You, servant. You're trying to get us into the nest. Her pupils shrank into needlepoints, and she drew a jade dagger with her delicate hand and aimed it at Mu Shui's neck with green light trembling. Shaking, sweat dripping from his face, his porcelain-white jade legs curled up, his chest pressed heavily against Lin Fan, causing hot and bloody marks. Mr. Lin, she's hiding it. Blood sacrifice for 4 people, for my descendants. Chu Tian's thick eyes were shocked and the axe blade crossed his chest and he growled, fuck. The pale ghost, the evil one with burn marks and green juice, I will kill him. The axe wind roared, but Mu Shui's pale body rolled away. She was hoarse and collapsed with tear marks mixed with green juice. Believe, the heart of the altar. The separated spirit resisted him, the burn marks sealed the soul. Otherwise, I'll kill you. The relief in front, rune comparison. Lin Fan pressed Yi Zhi's dagger with cold eyes, and pieced it together in his mind. Mu Shui's yin chi freezes the servant, and the burn mark runes resonate and protect, and the evil spirit is foreshadowed. He roared, provisional trust. 3 bloods in one, the blood of Yi Zhi's descendants, the green juice of Mu Shui's spirit, and the inverse talisman of my blood. Avoid the crowd and rush to the altar. The engineering shovel smashed against the wall and opened a short path, sparks spattered hot air, the 4 people rushed forward, the bell rang 3 times, parade turned, phosphorus fire blinked in sync, brushing against the shoulders, the black claw hook was empty, the fishy wind hit the back, the gel sticky clothes, the rust was sweet and greasy, choking the lungs. The relief wall appeared at the end of the passage. Blood-red runes swam like living snakes pulsing faster. Green jade runes buzzed and aimed at the brain like insects. Lin Fan's dagger scratched the heart of the arm with blood drops. The upper hook cut off the lower point and sealed the pen with green juice and Mu's snow burn marks squeezed out. The 3 bloods merged into one click. The embossed activated bone hand stretched out and roared away. The short path of the altar was opened, but Li Xiu's residual limbs exploded from behind, the blood pool and the heart beat again and bang bang 48, the intestines dragged and twitched and turned into puppets, the chest was torn, phosphorus eyes blinked, broken teeth, chewing instruments, the red lines clicked, the hooks and claws stretched and stacked, and the residual limbs crawled at a thunderous speed, and the residual urine, mixed with pus and blood, rushed towards the nose. Li Xiu, the mutilated limb. The mind-controlled corpse of the nest is resurrected. Chu Tian roared loudly and smashed the intestines with an axe, breaking the intestines, and black juice spurted out and burned his face, but his ankle was hooked and dragged, and the joints rubbed against the sand, can't pull away. Bite the leg meat. Yijime's beautiful eyes widened and she collapsed and screamed, weird things are immortal. Mr. Lin, scientifically burned. She slashed her arms with jade daggers and hams, and the green light flashed, but her intestines were wrapped tightly around her waist and her blood was sizzling. She screamed in pain and hit Lin Fan's chest in despair. It's over. The three bloods opened the way for backlash. Mushue's pale face was twisted and sunken, her eyes widened in fear, heart pulse. Burn the core. She slapped her heart with energy, and her heart snapped and froze, but the green juice was exhausted, and she fell to the ground with a split arm and coughed blood. Lin Fan's cold eyes flashed with tears, and his heart ached. Li Xiu, the former engineering genius, was now being hunted by corpses. Patterns flashed in his mind: fire is weak and parasitic, and hot spring grease detonates. Roaring and throwing the torch, the phosphorus green juice sprayed out and the hands shrank, the engineering shovel hook smashed against the wall and sparks flew wildly, the fire jumped up in the thunder, and the intestines crackled and exploded, the phosphorus fire on the stumps blinked intermittently, Li Xiu's puppet roared and twisted, stacked and burned, the black smoke billowed, the sulphurous rotten smell surged and choked the lungs like a sea of fire. Lin Fan's injured arm was bleeding and he was tearfully staring at his broken body that turned into ashes. Brother, rest in peace. The last blow of the shovel blade made his heart explode and die out, the red line instrument shattered and the signal was extinguished forever, and the puppet tide receded into pieces. Yijime's beautiful eyes suddenly shrunk in shock and she burst into admiration. Danfeng's eyes widened and she threw herself at Lin Fanhui with a trembling voice, Mr. Lin, burning friends with tears. God! Scientific fire weakness plus law, 3 blood reverse talismans open the way, your leader is invincible. Her fragrant sweat splashed against his arm and felt hot, and the blood marks on her jade legs were trembling but her strong chest was pressed hard. He murmured, complimentary. I believe you when I donate blood. Chu Tian's thick eyes widened in fear and turned to admiration. He leaned on the axe handle and gasped, Lin Fan, burnt Li Xiu with tears. It's useless for me to cut off my claws. You can destroy the nest with a shovel. The rules are awesome. He slapped Lin Fan on the back with blood flowing from his shoulder, laughed roughly and coughed, and the smoke in his nose was bloody and pungent. Mushue's pale lips curled into a wry smile and her eyes flashed with gratitude, the spirit separation certificate, the altar is close, and the soul of Xian Ming is hidden in the heart. The 4 of them panted and rushed into the short path, the flesh of the wall pulsed faster, the hot spring gurgled like boiling blood, and the bell whispered, sacrifice, eternal life. Shocked the soul. Lin Fan grabbed the instrument tightly and pulled Yi Ji into the dead end. The sound of the red rope breaking was heard, and the wall was completely closed, cutting off the escape route. The hot air from the depths sprayed on the face, the waves climbed towards the tail, the nest heart of the unknown resentful spirit was close at hand, and Li Xiu's heartbeat signal flashed wildly, indicating the beginning of a greater blood sacrifice. The phosphorus fire and green light squirmed like thousands of insects and gathered into the giant face of the resentful spirit. The skinny black robe twisted and floated above the central altar. The cracking of broken teeth echoed in the brain like nails scraping the bones. Descendants, sacrifice, eternal life. A low roar like a hot spring and an abyss grunt bursting straight into the eardrums. The fishy wind filled with sulfur and rotten sweet gel stuck to the lips and choked the lungs. The giant mouth quietly opened and the black hole swallowed up the light. The vine hot spring burst and wrapped around Yi Jiu's legs, and the flesh and blood rolled. The hook-claw servant knelt and licked the black blood, and the gulu rushed to her ankles, which was cold and sticky. Her beautiful eyes were wide open with fear and she screamed on the ground, Mr. Lin. Bite me with this huge mouth. Grandpa's taboo, the descendant's bloodline summons it. The green light flashed wildly as he picked at the jade with his delicate hands, and the blood marks on his ankles were trailing. Fragrant sweat dripped down his neck and soaked his collar, and his curves trembled. His chest pressed hard to the ground and he muttered in despair, "It's over. I'm a sacrifice, everything will be destroyed." Chu Tian's thick eyes widened in shock as he clenched the handle of the axe tightly and veins popped out. He roared and threw the axe, whizzing and chopping the vines. The vines snapped and black juice spurted out, burning his face. "Fuck." With a skinny face, claws kneeling and licking the hot spring vines. "I'll chop." But the axe blade sank into the flesh wall, veins pulsed and squeezed, bounced back, and sparks flew out. His shoulders were bleeding and painful, hook marks on his ankles were dragging his joints, and his thick legs were holding him back on the ground. Breathing like an ox with smoke burning in his nose and bloody nose, Lin Fan, this invisible axe of resentful spirits is useless. Yiji's legs are tied up, Mushua green juice is evil, where is the science? The hot spring gulu is accelerating like a heart explosion. His thick face, sweat and blood mixed with fear, stared at Lin Fan's back. His voice was trembling and on the verge of collapse. "I regret entering the game, the blood sacrifice is full of 4 people, and the lies about immortality are holding me back." Mu Shue's pale body curled up on the edge of the altar, green juice oozing out of the cracks in her burned arms, dripping with blood and evaporating the frost. Her deep-set eyes flashed and she was hoarse in pain. "Rune formation, work together." Xian Mingzi divided the spirit to protect the jade soul. I sealed the edge with green juice, and Lin Fan made up for it with the blood line. But her yin chi palm slapped the air, only freezing the phosphorus fire, sporadic cracks and fragments. She exhausted all her strength and coughed green blood and fell to the ground trembling. "Resist, he control my burn marks, swallow Yiji's descendants and wake them up." Lin Fan locked his cold eyes on the huge mouth of the resentful spirit, and his heart twisted like an iron hook. Yiji's worship relied on Fu Huai to donate blood to complement each other. The evidence of Mu Shue's separation was temporarily believed but full of doubts. Chu Tian's rough reinforcements collapsed and mocked science as useless. Li Xiu's former brothers burned ashes and said goodbye. The blood sacrifice was full, the hot spring pulse accelerated and the omen exploded. Who was sacrificed to break the situation? Xian Mushua's rune array detonates the maze. Or is Yiji's ancestral taboo self-destructive to the blood of his descendants? The alarm bells in the brain are blaring wildly. The jade talisman and the green light resonate through the brain to resurrect the magic. The 3-blood reversal and the foreshadowing of the nest closure are not yet complete. The unknown fear is overwhelming. The wall flesh is shifted, the throat is tightened, the crawling on the floor is approaching like a sea of worms awakening. Despair was swallowed up like a black tide. Lin Fan's arm was bleeding and in pain, and sparks flew out as the engineering shovel dragged the ground. He roared and suppressed Chu Tian's axe blade. "Chu Tian, guard against the servants." At the 3 bells, the turning and phosphorus fire blinked in a synchronous pattern. "Don't collapse." Chu Tian's thick eyes suddenly shrank in shock. "Principal. I'm endless chopping claws, you are as calm as a corpse." But his thick legs were shaking and holding the axe on the ground, the wind was whistling and the hooked claws were clanging. Fear turned. WeChat growled, "Okay. I'll listen to you." Yiji screamed, wrapped vines around her waist, and her flesh and blood sizzled in pain as she pounced on Lin Fan's knees, chest, and hot breath mixed with blood. "Mr. Lin. He's so close to his mouth that he's going to give me my blood to destroy the jade pendant." Her red phoenix eyes shrank, and the needle tip was splashed with fragrant sweat and scratched red marks on his arms in despair. "God of science, save." The game in Lin Fan's mind was like lightning, sacrificing Yiji's descendants to activate the ancestral line. Mushue Fenling green juice falsely testified to harm the whole group. No, the resonance of the green light is real. The comparison of the burn mark runes and the relief opening proves that the counterattack line requires 3 people to form a counterattack. He pulled the red rope to mark the edge of the altar, and drew the dagger on the palm of his hand. The blood-dropped jade talisman buzzed and flashed with green light. Mushue, the green juice supplements the pen. Yiji, the jade pendant soul injects the upper hook. The reverse talisman formation seals the giant mouth, and I place a point to seal the heart veins. The psychological balance is tilted, the resourceful plan overwhelms the fear, and the slight reversal starts from the third blood. Mu Shui clenched her pale lips tightly and her sunken eyes flashed with gratitude. The cracks in her burned arms squeezed the edge of the talisman array with green juice to resonate. She slapped the air with her yin chi palms, freezing the vines and cracking the frost cracks to stop the huge mouth. Lin Fan, the leader god. Spiritual separation certificate, I resist the control of Xian Mingzi. The green juice mixed with Lin Fan's palm blood converged and the runes swam around like a living snake, pulsing and accelerating, and the hot spring gulu whispered, sacrifice. Shocking the soul, but the green light of the talisman array resisted the black tide. Yiji's beautiful eyes widened with admiration and she trembled, 3 bloods again. Mr. Lin is invincible. She firmly pressed the jade pendant with green light and injected it into the hook-breaking pen. Her ancestral power activated the jade dagger, Yin Ham, wind and lightning, and cut the vines. The black juice spurted and burned her legs, but she was exhausted and sweating like rain. The rising and falling of his chest pressed against Lin Fan's arms, and he murmured, Grandpa's taboo, soul sacrifice and sealing of the spirit. The light of the jade soul rushed into the talisman formation, the vengeful spirit roared with its huge mouth, distorted its withered face, and blinked wildly with phosphorus fire and retreated for half a step. The servant knelt and licked its hooks and claws, grabbed the air, crackled and rustled for a while, and the bells whispered intermittently, as if they were suffocated. Chu Tian's thick eyes widened in shock, and the air stopped shaking. Fuck. The green light of the talisman seals the huge mouth. Yi Jihuan offers Yin Ham, Mu Shui's green juice is really resistant. Chu Tian's father cuts off his claws to no avail. Lin Fan, what's going on in your head? Science plus taboos are awesome. He patted Lin Fan's back with blood on his shoulder and coughed, then laughed roughly and turned to admiration. The rotten smell of sulfur in his nose weakened slightly. Panting, it's reversed. The gurgling of hot springs is slow, and the flesh of the wall is pulsing slowly. Lin Fan's cold eyes continued the game in his mind. The talisman formation was temporarily sealed, but Yi Ji fell to the ground after exhaustion, her jade legs curled up with blood stains, and her breath was weak. Mu Shui had a broken arm and coughed up green blood and was injured heavily on the ground. Chu Tian's ankle hook injury slowed down, and the heart of the resentful spirit was not extinguished. How could he destroy the core and detonate the maze to sacrifice the whole group? Record sequence escape. The fear of the unknown reappeared, and the rustling of the crawlers on the floor intensified, like thousands of insects gnawing at the bones approaching the soles of the feet. He roared and took the lead to attack the edge of the altar. Chu Tian back Yi Ji. Mu Shui shows the way, the core of the altar. The construction shovel smashed into the wall and opened a path, sparks and hot air spurted out. The 4 people pressed against the flesh wall, the sound of bells intermittent, the phosphorus fire blinked, the servants rubbed their shoulders, hooks and claws snapped, scratching the air. The edge of the altar appeared, with the bones of a 1,000-year-old warlock sitting cross-legged on the remains of a jade coffin. The core of the runes on the skinny chest and black robes pulsated with green light like a pounding heart. The hot spring vines wrapped around the bones and dripped black pus, corroding the cracks in the jade. The cracks in the phosphorus fire eyes blinked and the resentful spirits roared and echoed, eternal life, break me. The labyrinth collapsed. The air was thick and sulfuric, and the rotten sweetness penetrated into the nose and burned the lungs. Yi Ji murmured unconsciously. Mu Shui's pale face was distorted, her eyes were hoarse with fear. The core, the resentful heart of Xian Mingzi. To break it, you need to reverse all the runes, but the hot spring grease detonated the walls and melted the flesh, and the maze collapsed with no way out. My branch spirit is parasitic, and the burn marks know. The villagers' blood sacrifices were made here, and the jade sword of the guardian ancestors only sealed half of the body. She trembled and pointed at the rune sequence, wandering like a snake eating it. Lin Fan's flashlight beam swept through his mind and made shorthand notes, upper hook, lower point, seal pen, Add 3 blood to reverse the 12, the green jade talisman buzzed and aimed at the heart, the blood traces of the record sequence evaporated with his dagger, full sequence. Lay out the red rope to escape before breaking, sacrifice the core for life. Peak psychological game, after the record is broken, you will die. Is the full sequence of Xian Mushue authentic? Yi Ji's ancestral soul presentation proves it, Chu Tian's adoring eyes support him, his calmness overwhelms his despair, a slight reversal, and his resourcefulness is complete. On the back of Chu Tian's thick arm, Yi Ji gasped and widened his eyes in admiration. Lin Fan, shorthand spell sequence. I'm a fool to chop with an axe, you're a god. I'm going to blast the maze outside the wall to support you. He swung the axe and smashed the outer wall, veins pulsing, sparks splashing and heat waves spraying in the face. The red rope marks my blast path. Yi Ji's soul is temporarily sealed, you are heartbroken. I'm here to help. His thick leg was dragged in pain, but he patted Lin Fan's shoulder tenaciously. Awesome brother, science plus taboo are invincible. But the wall meat accelerated and shifted, the compressed space was as narrow as a python's throat, the veins bulged and contracted, the bones crunched, and the floor crawlers roared and rustled, and all the insects woke up and stretched out their claws to grab the ankles, which were cold and sticky. The resentful spirit roared and opened its huge mouth again, and the phosphorus fire and green light converged on Mushue's burn marks. The spirit split, swallow. The edges of Mushue's in-chi palm froze, but the green juice was all gone, and his arm fell to the ground, coughing blood. Lin Fan, sequence letter. Break it. Lin Fan's cold eyes flashed with murderous intention. The core of the shovel hook of the murderous project pulsated, and the game in his mind was determined, broken. The red rope swung the mark around Chu Tian's waist, the flashlight illuminated the sequence of daggers and swiped the arm to draw 3 blood points, and then dripped 12 green glows that resonated loudly, and the jade talisman was as hot as the external heart. He roared and smashed down. Brothers, the layout is like explosion. The shovel blade clanged, sparks splashed wildly, hot springs of grease leaped, flames crackled, and the core banged, black smoke billowed, sulfur surged, choking the lungs like a sea of fire, and the wraith screamed, twisted and thin faces shattered, phosphorus fire blinked, servants knelt and licked, collapsed, and the sand receded. But the wall accelerated and shifted and creaked and pressed against the space of only a few feet. The hot spring gulu exploded, vines wrapped around corpses and bones cracked and shattered, and the maze pulsated and trembled wildly. Chu Tian roared violently and charged Yi Ji towards the outer wall. I'm going to take over. The axe slashed at the wall flesh, the veins snapped, sparks flew out and hot air spurted out, his figure flashed out and the red rope tightened. Lin Fan is following. The maze collapsed. But the new wall flesh was displaced and the veins were squirming and squeezing. He yelled for help, echoing, fuck. The new lost place, the hooks and claws are here, save me. The red rope yanked the broken wire and the phosphorus eyes blinked. The black claw hook stretched out and crackled. Chu Tian groaned and fell into a new desperate situation. The axe wind roared and the blood from the broken claws sprayed hot on his face and growled, Lin Fan, the rules are awesome, don't throw me away. The crack in the core of the altar expanded, green light flashed, hot spring oil converged, and the grunt exploded. Lin Fan pulled Mushue's arm and injured his blood, dragging Yi Ji unconscious. The alarm bell in his mind, Chu Tian was trapped in a new road, the 3 blood bonds of the broken heart were deepened, and the unknown fear of the eternal shadow was coming again. The flesh of the wall creaked and compressed like a python's throat tightening, the grease from the hot springs merged into a river, black smoke rolled into the river, and the sulfur surged and choked the lungs like fire burning the heart and lungs. Lin Fan's arms were bloody and painful, and Mushue's pale body was thrown towards the core of the altar. Yi Ji was unconscious and her legs were curled up, and her flesh and blood were curled up. Fragrant sweat mixed with black pus was sticky, and she was dragging and slapping. The green light of phosphorus fire blinked wildly and gathered into the skinny huge mouth, roaring and twisting, rebellion, split spirit, eternal life shattered. The floor crawlers thundered and rustled, and thousands of insects' bone-gnawing hook claws stretched coldly to grab the ankles, pull the corners of clothes, and tear the rust. The sweet and tangy gel stuck to the tongue. Mu Shui split her arms, coughed up blood, and became hoarse. Lin Fan. Chu Tian's red rope broke, Xinlu's claws swallowed him, and the crack in his core expanded. The core of the curse was revealed. Her sunken eyes widened with fear, and she trembled. The Yin Chi palm was only frozen with scattered phosphorus fire crackling and shattering, and the burn marks and cracks were dripping with green blood, evaporating on the ground, and the frost was biting. The black tide of despair engulfed him. Chu Tian's rough roar echoed around the outer diameter like a muffled thunder blasting his brain. Fuck. The hooks and claws are biting my legs, the phosphorus fire blinks and the rear end pattern is broken. Lin Fan saves the brothers. The red rope is broken, the hooks and claws snap, the hook flesh is sprayed with blood, and the blood is burning. There is no way out, his shoulder is bleeding and sweating, his rough face is contorted with fear and on the verge of collapse. I regret that science is useless, the maze swallows the whole group alive. Lin Fan's cold eyes are unwavering, and the lightning game in his mind. Chu Tian is in danger, the core is about to explode and there is no way out. The three-blood reverse talisman is only half sealed, the heart of the resentful soul is beating again and requires foreign aid with gunfire. The trump card is now. He roared, swung the construction shovel, smashed the wall, and fired a short-distance fire wave of sparks in the face. Chu Tian, waist gun. Headshot the group of minions, 3-minute turn, phosphorus and fire blinking in sync. I pull the red rope. The flashlight beam pierced the black smoke and swept Chu Tian's figure, the dagger scratched the palm with blood dripping, the red rope buzzed, and the green light pulled out like a living snake. Chu Tian's thick eyes suddenly shrank in shock and mixed with ecstasy, and his thick hands touched the spare pistol on his waist, a black market modified shotgun, the trump card of a bold and careful weapons expert. Gun. I forgot. Lin Fan's miraculous eyes are so regular and he pulls me. He pulled the trigger and the roar was deafening. The bullet swept through the hooks and claws like a rainstorm, hitting the head, black blood sprayed on the wall, the flesh corroded, the veins spasmed and receded, the phosphorus fire blinked, the servants knelt and licked, collapsed and rustled into pieces. I'm suppressing the ghost with my firepower. The pain in the thick leg dragged the red rope. He rushed back to the altar with a swish, and Yi Ji's breathing on his shoulders was like a bull's nose, and the sweetness of sulfur was weakening. Brother, God's leader. Shoot away the undead with guns, chop endlessly with axes, save lives. His rough face was mixed with sweat and blood, and he burst into admiration, wide-eyed, and patted Lin Fan's arm. Blood was burning, science plus gun is invincible. Yi Ji's soul seals Mu Shui green juice, and I break the heart to protect the law. Mu Shui bit her pale lips and clenched her deep-set eyes, trembling with gratitude. Chu Tian gunfire, seal the servant. Lin Fan commanded, my green residual juice protects the inner pen of Yin Chi freeze. She squeezed out the green juice from her arm and dripped the runes, sizzling and resonating, freezing the hot spring vines. The crackling frost paused the grunt explosion. Lin Fan calmed down and memorized the entire sequence of 12 strokes. The upper hook was broken and the lower point sealed the three-blood reverse change. His command was like iron. Chu Tian's gun swept through the outer circle of servants to block it regularly. Yi Ji fainted and whispered, her beautiful eyes slightly opened and her phoenix pupils shrank, her needle-pointed eyes widened in fear, her delicate hand pressed tightly on the jade pendant, the green light of the soul came out, the jade dagger in hand flashed and slashed close to her body, the hook claw clicked and black juice sprayed out. Her legs were burning and aching, her breasts pressed hard against Chu Tian's thick arms, sweat splattered with red marks and she screamed, Mr. Lin, the giant shadow is coming, my relatives turned into zombies and hallucinated to bite me. But she was trembling with admiration and held herself up to the ground. God commands, souls are offered to protect the law. The scene was as grand as the eruption of hell. The wraith's skinny mouth turned into a black shadow. The climax counterattacked. phosphorus fire and green light gathered into a sea. Black robes twisted and floated above the altar. Broken teeth clicked and grinded the brain like iron nails and scratched the soul. Illusion, heart-eating, eternal slave. The fishy wind was filled with sulfur. The sulfur-sweetened gel stuck to his lips and made his lungs convulse. The claws and arms of the giant shadow stretched out to cover the sky and catch everyone. Hallucinations were like poisonous mist. Chu Tian's thick eyes exploded as he saw the corpse of his dead mother transforming into hooks and claws, stretching out its neck, flesh and blood rolling over its intestines and dragging the floor. "Mom! What a ghost, I'm here. Shoot your corpse's head." The muzzle trembled and roared as he swept his head, black blood sprayed out and sparks flew. His thick legs were weak at the peak of fear, and he was panting like a cow. The hallucination is really biting my heart. Science collapsed. Lin Fan, save me. Yi Ji screamed and hit Lin Fan's knees and chest with intense pressure and hot breath. Grandpa transformed into a corpse and knelt down to lick the black blood and sacrifice it to my leg. The forbidden bloodline was destroyed. She slashed the air with her jade dagger, and the Yin fire flashed and burned the phantom. The fragrant sweat flowed down her neck, soaked her collar, soaked her curves, trembled and whispered in despair, "It's over, my loved ones have eaten my whole heart." Mu Shui's pale body curled up with burn marks and cracks, the green juice evaporated from the frost. She stared in horror as she saw the corpse of her missing sister turning into green juice and burning her arms. "Sister, you are under spiritual control and you bite my sister. Xian Mingzi phantom bites me." Yin Qi slapped the air with his palm and the frozen phantom clicked, but he was exhausted and coughed green blood and fell to the ground trembling. Lin Fan. I collapsed at the peak of my psychology. I blew myself up. The spirit is weakened. Lin Fan locked his cold eyes on the giant shadow and tried to overcome his despair. He saw Li Xiu's incinerated stumps, limbs and intestines, and the puppets were chasing his former brothers. "Repair, the heart pulse, do you want to be a servant?" The engineering shovel mopped the ground and the alarm bells rang wildly to piece together, hallucinations eating the heart's weak points. The entire sequence was reversed and the shell was broken. He roared and suppressed Chu Tian's gun arm. Chu Tian headshots the phantom corpse group, and the 3-clock turning phosphorus fire blinks with the rifle. Yi Zimukshu protects the law. I manually crack the core. The dagger swiped the arm for 3 blood points, and then dripped 12 more buzzing green lights to reach the black tide, and the flashlight illuminated the rune sequence and quickly recorded the pulse of a living snake on his palm. Chu Tian roared violently and shook his head, sweating and blood flying away from the muzzle of the gun. He held his head in admiration. Lin Fan calmed down. "I'll shoot the corpses in the head, but the phantom mother's corpse bites are useless." The bullets roared like a thunderstorm and swept away the phantom group of servants. The bells rang intermittently, and his thick leg was injured. The defender weaved a fire net and used his claws to grab the empty blood and sprayed his face with blood. The gunfire suppressed the ghost. Lin Fan broke through the awesome protection. The fear on his thick face turned to fanaticism and his eyes widened and he growled, "Brothers are invincible, science gun plus talisman destroy immortality." Yi Ji's beautiful eyes widened in admiration. The jade dagger was guarded by Yin fire, and the hook and claws clicked. "Mr. Lin is the leader." Grandpa Huan knelt down and licked it to pieces. He sacrificed his soul without regrets. Mu Shui trembled and touched the pen with green juice to fill her hoarseness. The protector, self-destructed. Her burn marks and cracks were green. The flash of light exploded like a sea of green fire, rushing into the giant shadow's heart veins, corroding the skinny black robe, twisting and shrieking, retreating half a foot away. The phosphorus fire blinked out, and the servants knelt and licked the shattered sand. The pale body fell to the ground with weak breath and coughed up all the green blood. Weaken. Xian Mingzi controls the break. Lin Fan stabs. The giant shadow roared, twisted and withered face, shattered, phosphorus fire and green light gathered in a low roar, eternal life, devour. The black claws and giant arms pounced on Lin Fan, swallowing the bottomless black hole, hot springs, and the grease golem merged to scald the flesh and blood of his arms. The core of his engineering shovel hook pulsed, clanging sparks splashed wildly, and he was almost swallowed. His arm was injured, blood flowed, and the brain was at the peak of the game, piercing the shell. Brothers, join forces, stab. Chu Tian's thick arm rifle but smashed his claws, headshots, fire pressure, hook claws and cracks. Yi Ji's knees and chest pressed on the jade dagger's ham, the core crackled and burned with black pus. Mu Shui's remaining air froze and cracked at the edges. The three of them worked together. Lin Fan's dagger plus shovel blade stabbed together, the rune shell buzzed with green light, and the 12 pulses accelerated. And the heart of the spirit of hatred jumped, black smoke surged, sulfur choked the lungs, and exploded like a sea of fire. The outer shell cracked and shattered, revealing the core of the curse, the blood-red crystal pulsating like the eyes of a vengeful spirit blinking and whispering, "Break, the labyrinth eternal slave." But the glimmer of victory faded instantly, and the maze collapsed with no way to escape. The green veins in the wall squirmed and crunched, and the space collapsed. The hot springs exploded, and the sea of grease crackled and burned. The floor cracked, and insects rustled, bone-gnawing hooks stretched out, and ice stuck to the ankles. Chu Tian's red rope outer diameter, a new lost path, and phosphorus fire chased after the servants. Yi Jichong roared at his back, the core of Lin Fan's curse is exposed, and there is no way to collapse. The gun sweeps the path. The gunfire roared through the wall, and the fire wave crackled, but the veins regenerated and squeezed the bones. Mu Shui's pale lips were bloodless and trembling, nuclear vein. The blood of the villagers sacrifices to the source, and it will be broken and melted without life. Yi Ji whispered in a coma, her beautiful eyes slightly opened in fear, "Mr. Lin. Eternal shadow bite." Lin Fan's cold eyes flashed murderously and dragged everyone's arms by the red rope, blood dripping from the core, and the game continued in his mind, record the nuclear sequence to escape. Reversal at the expense of your trump card. The fear of the unknown overwhelms the reptiles, and the thunder approaches the soles of the feet, like a sea of worms awakening, and the flames of the hot springs leap into the sky, and the black smoke obscures the eyes, and the bells ring intermittently, foreshadowing the impending danger again. The green veins in the flesh of the wall are like thousands of insects dancing wildly, the crunching and crushing of the parietal bones is deafening, the hot spring grease explodes in the sea of fire, the air is hot, the air is distorted, the heat wave hits the face, the skin and flesh are burning and painful. Lin Fan's cold eyes scan the blood-red crystals, pulsating and whispering, buzzing in the brain. The iron nails scratched the soul, broken, slave, melted. The floor cracked and cracked into an endless abyss. Black mist rolled into the sky. Thousands of insects rustled and thundered. Bone-gnawing hooks and claws were cold and sticky. They stretched out to claw at his ankles and tear off his clothes. The sweet and greasy gel of rust hit his nose and choked his lungs. He spasmed, and his arms were bloody and painful. The red rope of Mu Shui's pale body broke and flew away. Chu Tian roared loudly and threw Yi Ji staggering towards the altar. The gun muzzle trembled and shotgun roared and swept away the new minions. Headshots were shot. Black slurry sprayed on the wall and corroded. Sparks were sprayed. Heat waves, fuck. It collapsed and there was no way out. Hook, I can't suppress the bug biting the leg, but Lin Fan has a sharp eye. His thick legs were hooked, his bones were mixed with blood, his face was twisted with fear, and his eyes were round and on the verge of collapse. Yi Jixiang's shoulders were drenched in sweat, and she was gasping for breath like sulfur sweetness in her nose. Mu Shui's breath was weak, her pale lips were clenched, her sunken eyes were wide open in fear, she was coughing green blood, her voice was hoarse and trembling, nuclear. The blood sacrifice of the village lark melted my spirit. Lin Fan escaped, the map. The green light in her burn marks faded into shreds of tobacco and she circled around her fingers. The rune fragments in the palm of his hand flickered like a living snake pulsing, and the back of Lin Fan's hand was instantly engraved with ice and coldness. The lightning game in Lin Fan's mind recorded in the palm of his hand 12 green lights in reverse order, buzzing and reaching the black tide, and the dagger swiped his arm for 3 blood drops to complete the low roar. The map is complete. Chu Tian's gun sweeps away the insect rear guard, Yi Zhiyu's dagger protects the left path, I identify the right collapse path. The engineering shovel hooks the wall and opens the short path. Mars sprays hot on the face, but the veins regenerate and squeeze the finger bones, and the hallucination aftermath is poisonous fog. Li Xiu's brain was burned to ashes, his stumps were resurrected, his intestines were jumping, the puppets were chasing after each other, the phosphorus fire was blinking, and the 3-minute turning pattern was reappearing. Cultivation, Heart Meridian Leader. He calmly suppressed despair and shook his head. The electric beam pierced the black smoke and locked the pulsation of the runes like a heartbeat omen. The black tide of despair devoured the surrounding areas, and the blood-red crystals of the vengeful spirits pulsated faster. The slits in the eyes of the vengeful spirits blinked and turned into whispers. A huge roar echoed in their brains, eternal slave. Melt. The remains of the skinny giant shadow reunited from the core. Black robes twisted and floated. The phosphorus fire and green light sea surged to cover the sky and the sun. The claw arms stretched out to grab everyone. The flames of the human hot spring spread into the sky, and the black smoke was sticky, and the rust was sweet and tangy to the nose. The servants knelt and licked the swarm of hooks and claws, which were sticky and clawed at the ankles. The floor was cracked by insects. The abyss swallowed the legs and rolled up the blood and flesh. Chu Tian's thick eyes widened when he saw the ghost mother transforming into a corpse, dragging her intestines and dragging her intestines, biting her neck, and blood spraying out on her rough face. The ghost bites me again, and my heart is broken. The explosion was useless and collapsed, and everyone died. He pulled the trigger and fired a torrent of shotguns, sweeping away the phantom corpses. The corrosion receded, but his legs were weak and his thick arms were shaking. The butt of the gun smashed his claws and sparks flew out. He collapsed in fear and roared, Lin Fan saved the brother, the science gun collapsed the maze and swallowed him alive. Yi Zhi woke up slightly and her beautiful eyes widened and her phoenix pupils shrank. Lin Fan screamed with fear and screamed at his knees and chest. The hot breath and mixed blood and fragrant sweat were splashed, the giant corpse is coming, Grandpa's phantom bites the legs and bites the soul, and the bloodline destroys the whole group and falls into the abyss. The jade dagger in Ham wind slashed close to the hook and clicked. Black juice spurted hot. The jade legs were in pain. He curled up and trembled in despair, it's over, the soul has no way out. Mushu faded away from the smoke and surrounded her body with green awns, frost and cold, sporadic phosphorus fire crackled, but she was exhausted, coughed up green blood, and fell to the ground hoarsely. Finally, the 3 talisman bends on the right side of the map are inverse, pale. Her pale body turned into green smoke and rushed into Lin Fan's palm. The runes pulsated and the map in Sheng's mind showed the pattern of the abyss. Chu Tian's thick face was mixed with sweat and blood, and his eyes were rounded in shock and ecstasy. Lin Fan's cold eyes and Wubua's wits pushed him forward and pulled the broken wire of Chu Tian's waist, then tied the gun but to open the path of Mars' heat wave. Identified the reverse talisman of the 3rd bend on the right. The 3-minute clock of the insect tide blinked and pressed with the rifle. Yi Zhi blocked the giant corpse and I opened the way. The 4 of them staggered and fought while fleeing against the wall, crushing their bones and crushing them. The black mist rolled into the abyss. Thousands of insects gnawed at their bones, claws, and the ice pulled and tore their clothes. The hot springs and grease poured into the sea of fire, scalding their backs, scorching their skin, and choking their lungs with sulfur, which burned their hearts like fire. The central altar in front glowed with green light, and the resentful spirits roared, descendant sacrifice. The huge mouth quietly opened and rushed towards Yi Zhi. Phosphorus fire and green light gathered on the resentful face and twisted the skinny black robe. The servants knelt and licked the black claw hot spring. The vines burst and entangled themselves, and the eternal shadow swallowed the thin ice and shattered the edges. Groups of giant corpses swarmed, giant shadows covered the sky with their clawed arms, black robes were skinny and twisted, fantasy, falling. The sea of phosphorus fire and green light burst into Yi Jiu's legs, claws tearing away the blood and flesh, rolling over the fragrant sweat and mixing it with black pus. Her beautiful eyes widened in fear and she screamed. He threw himself forward to block the giant corpse from falling off the edge of the cliff, his chest pressed heavily against Chu Tian's thick arms, and he mixed his blood with heat. Mr. Lin, his blood blocked the giant corpse, and his soul opened a way to escape. The jade dagger, ham, and wind exploded, and the hook clicked, and the black juice sprayed hot on the waist and ankles. She huddled on the ground and trembled. The claws of the giant corpse pushed her slender body, spinning and falling into the abyss. The black mist engulfed her and her screams echoed, God's leader. Eternal E. Chu Tian roared loudly, tears and blood mixed with his eyes rounded in shock. He collapsed and shot at the remaining corpses on the edge of the cliff. Yi Ji sacrificed himself to stop the corpse, which is awesome. Lin Fan's hand commanded me to regret that I was unable to protect him. The rough face was twisted and the fear peaked into fanatical worship. Beautiful blood saves the whole group, gunfire revenge is endless. Lin Fan's cold eyes flashed with pain and despair. The runes pulsing in his palms and the map all showed the peak of the brain game. Yi Jihuan, the reverse talisman on the third right corner is opened. The Chu Tian gun crushes the insect swarm, I will shovel the wall to identify it. The engineering shovel hook tilted the wall and the Mars heat wave opened the path. The flashlight beam stabbed the black smoke and swept the runes. The green light pulled the living snake out and sprang out. 3 bloody arm wounds dripped on the ground and sizzled and evaporated. Frost and cold sporadic hooks the claws clicked, and the map of Mu Shuyan faded the whisper in his mind, reverse, life. The blood-red crystal of the resentful spirit pulsated and whispered frantically, then screamed, slave, shattered. The remains of the skinny giant shadow twisted the black robe, burned the phosphorus fire, blinked the servants and collapsed, rustling and kneeling, licking the ebbing tide. The abyss was full of insects, rustling and thundering, chasing after them, but turning at 3 o'clock, the phosphorus fire and the rifle blasted the head, and the black slurry corroded endlessly. The thrill of escape explodes at the peak. Lin Fan calmly leads with invincible resourcefulness, reverse talismans in the palm of his hand, the 12 branches humming, the green sea of mang reverses and pulses, piercing the labyrinth of living flesh, the veins of the wall spasm, crunching, shrinking, the hot springs, the sea of fire, temporarily suspending the grunt, the cracks in the floor, the frost and rattle insects. The tide of ice froze, and Chu Tian's thick eyes suddenly shrunk in shock. And he roared in ecstasy at the peak of his admiration, Lin Fan's palm talisman is awesome and reverse. I'm the god of discipline with my gun, and Yi Jimu's snow soul presents no regret science plus taboo invincibility. He held the gun steady while weaving a firepower net to guard the defenders in the rainstorm. The protector's thick leg was dragged with pain, and blood spurted out, but he patted Lin Fan's back with wild eyes, brother's divine eye map recognition. The giant corpse exploded and the puppet fell to pieces on the cliff to clear the way, and the gunfire protector's immortal slave collapsed. The core pulse of the vengeful spirit trembled and the blood-red crystal crack expanded. Blinking away, the whisper turned into a scream of despair, melt, regret. Xian Ming is shattered. The withered face was distorted and regretful. The green light exploded and corroded the black robe. The sea of fire and ash destroyed all the servants. The third curved road on the right appeared, the phosphorescent flashing bell at the exit was intermittent. Lin Fan roared and pulled the red rope to pull Chu Tian staggering closer. The nuclear explosion will collapse, the gun will sweep away the last bug. Chu Tian's thick arms smashed the hook with the butt of the gun, sparks flew out and worshipped. Lin Fan leads the god, the maze reverse talisman breaks the core and regrets it, and the brothers escape invincibly. But the core veins are pounding, blood-red cracks, green fire is flying into the sky, black smoke is rising, and the total collapse is approaching the abyss, swallowing the sky, and thousands of insects are resurrecting, and only 2 people are approaching the exit. The shadows are forever pressing against the feet of unknown fear and thunder. The slightly phosphorescent exit blinked like a ghost's eyes in the black fog, the bell chimed intermittently like a breathless gasp, the rustling of insects and thunder on the soles of the feet approached the cold claws, stretched out to grab the ankles, and pulled. Lin Fan tightened the red rope and yanked Chu Tian's thick body forward. The flashlight beam pierced the thick smoke and swept away the runes. The green light pulsed and the aftermath buzzed into the brain. There were 3 blood wounds on his arms. The pain in his mouth evaporated, the frost and cold condensed into blood scabs, his cold eyes were calm, and the 12 branches of the map in his mind were reversed like a living snake swimming around to predict the collapse pattern. The Chu Tian gun pressed down on the soles of his feet, the insect swarm, the right bending talisman reversed the 3/4 opening, and Mu Zuayan protected the speed and rushed forward. The sulfur, rotten, rusty smell mixed with the hot spring grease gulu, scalding the skin on the back, the air twisted and choked the lungs like fire burning the throat. Chu Tian's thick leg was hooked, blood splashed and dragged, sparks splashed, gun but smashed, claws cracked, black juice splashed on his face, burning pain, his thick eyes widened with fear at the peak, sweat and blood mixed with tears, twisted and growled, on the verge of collapse. Lin Fan's exit is close, but the insect hook on the bottom of his foot, my leg bone is shattered, sand and sand eat my soul, the phantom of the corpse bites the neck again, plasma sprays hot, the gun bullet can't hold it down and swallows the abyss. The shotgun blasts in a continuous rainstorm, sweeps the phosphorus, fire blinks and snaps in sync. The black slurry corroded the floor, sparks exploded, and weaved a fire net to protect the defenders, but the poisonous fog in the hallucinations penetrated the brain. Li Xiu's intestinal tract puppet jumped again and roared, broken. His thick arms trembled, the muzzle shifted, and his legs weakened. He knelt down and screamed in fear, science collapsed in the labyrinth and swallowed my brothers alive. Yijimu's snow soul gave up to me, and I was useless. His thick face was as pale as paper, and the rotten sweetness in his nose swelled with convulsions and black blood. Lin Fan shook his head and pressed the hallucination electric light beam to lock the veins in the wall. The spasm pulsed. The engineering shovel hook tilted the wall and crunched. The heat wave of Mars opened a short path. The rune fragments of moose snow smoke on the back of the hand flashed. Chu Tian's thick eyes suddenly shrank and widened in shock. He burst into ecstasy and slapped Lin Fan's arm with blood and pain. He roared at the peak of worship, Lin Fan's divine palm is so awesome. The law of 10,000 insects is frozen and I can survive with my gun. Mu Xuan protects Yiji's soul and dedicates himself to help his brothers. Enemy. He struggled to support the ground, smashed his claws with the gun butt, and sparks flew out. He glared wildly, dragging his legs, injured, blood spurting out, catching up with the red rope, tugging at the hot breath, and sweating. The leader's divine eyes predicted the whole sequence, and the phantom corpse's intestines were shattered and the gun swept away with eternal scientific revenge. The core veins behind the back are banging, the blood-red crystal cracks are green fire, the sky is skyrocketing, the black smoke is rising, the total collapse is deafening, the abyss is swallowing the sky, thousands of insects are reviving, the thunder is coming from the hooks and claws on the soles of the feet, the ice is sticky, pulling and tearing the corners of the clothes, the ghost is haunted by the skinny giant shadow, the black robe is twisted, the sea of phosphorus, green light is blowing on the face, the whisper is turning into a huge roar, echoing in the brain, eternal slave. Regret and chasing. Illusion strengthens the mother's corpse, Yiji, Li Xiu, Mushua's remnant soul reappears in the hook intestine. Biting the neck, rustling, phosphorus, fire, blinking for 3 minutes, tailing, rust, sweet gel, pungent, choking, lung spasm, Lin Fan calmly suppressed despair, the runes in his palm pulsed and whispered, Yi Ji's bloodline is separated from the snow, the soul's secret is revealed. He shoveled the wall on the spot, mixed with dust, and carved the ultimate cracking array. The rear of the Chu Tian palace roared loudly, and the muzzle-top afterimage continued to blast shotguns, rainstorms, webs, corrosion, and black slurry fountains. His face was scalding and painful. His thick legs curled up in pain and widened in fear, but turned into fanatical worship. Lin Fan's magic skill in carving formations is awesome. The afterimage of the resentful spirit can't be suppressed by the pursuit gun, but the green light leaks out, and the frozen soul, I continue to fire and protect the law. The butt of the gun smashed the hook and fired. Star heat waves splashed on the shoulders and back, hook marks were deep in the bones, blood mixed with sweat, thick arms trembled, and the trigger was violently exploded, and the phosphorus fire blinked out intermittently. The fantasy mother's corpse bit her neck and sprayed plasma, and the illusion was shattered. His thick eyes stared at Lin Fan's back in shock and roared in ecstasy, brothers lead the peak of resourcefulness and reverse transformation, Yi Zimuxu's soul power borrows gunfire, endless science plus taboos, great pleasure. On the way, the ghost of Yi Ji appeared, a slender body with green light, beautiful eyes, soft light, twinkling, fragrant and sweaty shadows, curves that pressured the air, blood, fragrance, and sulfur. She whispered hoarsely and trembled to convey the final secret of protection, Mr. Lin. Bloodline Jade Pendant Secret, a drop of blood from the heart core of the counter-talisman melts into the source of regret, and the soul lock is broken after the exit bell rings 3 times. The Jade Dagger, Ham, Wind, and Aftershocks flickered, body protection, frost, cold hooks, and the abyss was swallowed up by the black mist. Her screams echoed and faded, and she clenched her pale lips tightly. Fear turned and tender attachment pounced on Lin Fan's knees. The phantom's chest was filled with intense pressure and hot breath splashed out. God's leadership will always rely on, the soul will open the way without regrets. The ghost smoke turned into green light and rushed into the palm of his hand. The runes pulsated. All the secrets appeared in Lin Fan's brain. Fan's cold eyes flashed with pain, and Chu Tian's thick eyes burst into tears and blood mixed with shock and admiration. He roared in ecstasy at the peak of his excitement, the ghost of Yi Ji is awesome at passing on the secret. The beauty's bloodline saves the group, the soul chain is broken, and I gunsweep the guardian brothers. It's so exciting that my heart turns into a frenzy. Mu Shui's Yin Qi assisted the speed. The green light in the palm of the hand faded and the frost and cold burst wrapped around the soles of their feet. They accelerated and slid like ice rails, whizzing and turning, with burn marks and cracks. The aftermath of the green juice whispered, third from the right, light life. Her afterimage of the pale girl widened in fear, coughed all her green blood and fell to the ground, melted into smoke and protected her body with all her strength. The map in Lin Fan's mind was embellished with patterns. The abyss swallowed his legs, hallucinations, and the ebb tide. All insects rustled and froze. At the end, Chu Tian's rough face was distorted with sweat and blood, eyes rounded in shock, and he burst into admiration. Mu Shui's Yin Qi accelerates the divine help. The smoke map protector Lin Fan has all the palm talismans, and the invincible escape from the gunfire is great. The butt of his thick arm smashed the chasing shadow, sparks sprayed out, blood spurted out, but he patted Lin Fan's back so hard that it was hot and painful. The divided spirit resisted the soul's sacrifice to use the speed, the brothers' leader's divine eyes borrowed the soul to be unparalleled. The exit opened, the phosphorescent bell rang 3 times, the soul lock broke, crunched, the black mist rolled back, the hot spring exploded, the wall of fire and the prairie fire exploded, the wall collapsed, the parietal bone shattered, and the ear-splitting sound was heard. The body of the resentful spirit chased after him, the skinny giant shadow Xian Mingzi's real body, black robe, burned the blood-red crystal, shattered the green fire, self-exploded, corroded, phosphorus, sea of fire, extinguished, roared in despair, repent, broken slave. Claw arms cover the sky, hooks, thousands of insects, thunder, bone-eating ice, sticky ankles, pulling the abyss, total collapse, swallowing the sky. But the ultimate formation in Lin Fan's palm, the sea of green light, reversed and pulsated, pierced the core, dripped blood, and melted. The source buzzed, and the energy leaked out. The whole place clicked, a wave of insects knelt and licked the ashes, and the flying servants collapsed and rustled. Chu Tian roared loudly, and finally shot the bullet to the chest, blasted the head, and the black slurry fountain corroded the giant's shadow and fell into the abyss. Outside the cemetery, the mountain wind howls, the ancient tombs are silent, the mounds are silent, the white mist is lingering, the bells are ringing forever, the sweetness of sulfur has faded away, the rust has faded, the odor has dispersed, the air is fresh, the birds are chirping, Lin Fan is panting, propped on the ground, the flashlight falls, the beam of light sweeps away the remaining shadows, leaving no trace. Tian's thick body was covered with wounds and his thick legs curled up in plasma gel. Chu Tian survived. Xian Ming regretted the nuclear collapse and was completely destroyed, Yi Ji Muxue and Li Xiu's soul sacrificed for eternity. The jade pendant, ancient jade, green light, fire intestinal tube, puppet, phosphorus fire blinked out, the abyss swallowed up the scream, and the unknown shadow pressed down on the soles of the feet, leaving a rustling sound and hallucinations. Chu Tian's thick face turned pale and turned red, mixed with sweat and blood, and his eyes were wide-eyed in shock. He was at the peak of ecstasy and rushed forward to hug Lin Fan's shoulders with his thick arms. The pain was so intense that he roared loudly, "Brother Lin Fan is invincible." The palm talisman engraved array is reversed and the core is shattered. The gunfire protector soul rushes out quickly. Yi Ji's ghost passes on the secrets and Mu Shui's yin qi to help Li Xiu Yong, who is at the peak of great science plus taboo. His thick legs are hurt, but he is dragging his legs in pain, but he is enthusiastically slapping the ground with the remains of Mars and Ash, and smashing the gun butt into the ground. Eyes wide open, tears and blood splashing, I collapsed in fear, phantom biting my mother's corpse, brother's intestines and biting his soul, but your divine eye leadership's prediction rules are completely broken, the gun blasts the head, sprays black slurry, corrodes, and breaks the heart-turning fanatic eternal brothers. The smell of moss in the breeze woke up his thick eyes, flashing with pain and sorrow. Beautiful Yi Jihuan offered to shield the corpse, pressed the hot breath of Mu Shuyuan into the palm of his hand, Li Xiu's gun blasted the heart veins and flew away. Endless revenge. The dawn broke through the mist of the mountain village, and smoke curled up from cooking stoves. Dogs barked faintly. Lin Fan stood up to pick up a flashlight, a dagger, an engineering shovel, a red rope, a broken wire, and the rune fragments peeled off like pieces of jade. The green glow stayed forever, and the map in Mu Shui faded away, leaving an eternal mark in his mind. Mingzi's thousand-year evil spell merged with his slave's regret, and he whispered, "The treasure is in hand, the guardian secret of the reverse talisman jade piece, which can break the thousand-year maze forever." Chu Tian's thick eyes suddenly shrank and stared at the jade piece in shock and admiration. Lin Fan's treasure is awesome. Archaeological artifacts have been scientifically verified by Laozi's black market. The gun was exchanged for treasure without regrets, and the reputation was passed down. The village cemetery was cursed and became a legend for future generations. The old man from the village leaned on his stick and came to hear the wind with a wrinkled face and a round face. He listened to the details of the escape and his voice was trembling and hoarse. "Young man, the dead awakened at midnight, living in the cemetery, and thousands of insects devoured the bone wall and moved into the abyss. Xian Mingzi, the village legend, sacrificed blood to the spirits and escaped." Lin Fan, with trembling gray hair, pointed at the green light in his palm, and his eyes widened in fear and awe. "God. The runes are reversed and the old man has heard the rumors of his ancestors. This is the only way to make the village famous." The village chief summoned the villagers to watch the two people on the slope covered with scars and bruises. Lin Fan calmly recounted the details of Yi Ji's bloodline and Mu Shui's separation of souls, and the details did not hide the illusion. The heart-gnawing hot spring exploded and collapsed. The villagers gasped. Women and children screamed and covered their faces. The old woman trembled and knelt. The guardian descendant of the Yi family, the female soul, presented a jade dagger and een fire to block the giant corpse. The pale girl resisted the spirit smoke map to protect the students. The gods led the gunfire brothers to break the curse. Chu Tian laughed and slapped the blood on his chest. The blood oozed out and roared proudly, "I am the queen of the palace," with shotguns, rainstorms, and nets, which hit my head with black pulp and corroded it, but Lin Fan's divine eyes and his wits cut through the blood and melted the source. "It's awesome." The villagers stared in admiration. The young man clenched his fists and shouted, "Hero!" There is no more crawling sound of undead in the cemetery at midnight, and the reputation of the village's safety spreads to the city. The archaeological community is shocked. The child's round eyes blinked the green light on the jade in the palm of his finger. "Uncle, baby, shine with divine light, break the evil forever." The medical herbal medicine applied to the wound moss was bitter and pungent, and the hot compress on the nose melted the blood scab and relieved the acrid pain. Lin Fan sat cross-legged on the edge of the bed, and the eternal shadow in his head pressed against the soles of his feet. Fantasy rustling, unknown fear and thunder loomed. Chu Tian. The whole blood sacrifice of the village bailings was confirmed by Mu Shui. Xian Ming regretted it, but the aftermath of the abyss. Chu Tian's thick leg was wrapped with wide eyes and he fanatically pressed doubts. Brothers' palm talismans are forever, and the gunfire guardian has been scientifically proven to be safe. Yi Zimuxu's soul is happy to take revenge, and the status, treasure, and fame are a great victory. The village chief presented an ancient book, a parchment scroll, and compared the runes with a trembling voice. "The hero left a piece of jade in the village, and it will be passed down to future generations to survive 1,000 years of despair." The dawn filled the room with the chirping of birds, the breeze blew in the face, and the sense of accomplishment filled my heart. The afternoon sun shines on the village road, children chase and laugh. Lin Fan leans on Chu Tian's thick arms against a tree, the blood scabs and new flesh squirm, the green light on the palm of his hand flashes, the know-how in his mind remains forever, the archaeological status rises to the treasure town. Chu Tian smiles thickly and his eyes widen in admiration. "Brothers, always follow me." The villagers gathered around to toast, and the aroma of rice was fragrant, and the hot steam steamed their faces. The old man whispered, "The undead in the cemetery are awakened, crawling on the floor, and crawling on the wall to their death. God leads the escape, and the aftermath is safe." But Lin Fan looked coldly at the cemetery mounds, trembling in the mist, and the phosphorus fire was blinking, and the lingering sound of rustling on the soles of his feet was accompanied by unknown fear, and there was an undercurrent surging in the calmness of achievement. The afternoon sun shines slantingly on the village road. Children laugh and trample fallen leaves. The scent of wine floats from the old woman's dust basket and the heat steams her face. Lin Fan leans on the rough locust tree bark and the thorns on his back. The green light of the jade in his palm shimmers like a living pulse. The pulse in his head is trembling. The map in his head is always there. The magic rustle under his feet is like a low voice. The remnants of insect breath drilled into the earth, pulling at the ankle bones, and chills ran down the legs. He looked coldly at the cemetery, mounds, and the shadows were moving. The phosphorus fire was blinking. The sound of the bells was buzzing intermittently. The eardrums were rusty, the sweet aftertaste of rot was gel, the nasal cavity was sticky, and the tongue was sticky. The calmness was like a crack in the thin ice. The undercurrent surged, and the unknown fear overwhelmed the heartbeat slightly. Chu Tian's thick arms were draped over his shoulders, and his blood-scarred new flesh was squirming. His thick legs were wrapped in cloth, and he was walking limply. The butt of his gun was slanted on his shoulder, and black market shotgun shells were clinking. His thick face was ruddy with beads of sweat rolling down his eyes, and he was fanatical in admiration. He roared loudly and photographed Lin Fan. "The back is hot, brother Lin Fan, the god and man will live forever." The palm talisman drips with blood, the reverse core, the green light sea pierces the mysterious world, regrets it, thousands of insects kneel and lick the ashes, the flying servant collapses, I stick the gun to the chest, and finally headshot, the black pulp fountain corrodes the giant shadow, falls into the abyss, great science plus taboo peak release, let go. The villagers gathered around to toast and the hot breath hit their nostrils. The old man's voice was hoarse and trembling, and his wrinkled face turned from fear to awe. The two heroes broke through the midnight maze, crawled on the floor, and moved around the wall. Yi Jihuan offered Mu Shui the whole picture of the blood sacrifice of the Bailings of Yongjue village is exposed by Yanhu Li Xiu's magic weapon, which guarantees the peace of the future generations. The women and children covered their faces and sobbed, while the children blinked and pointed at the green light of the jade. Uncle's divine light suppresses evil, and there is no claws and bone-gnawing hot springs to burn the back. But at the end of the village road, the shadow of the old grave swayed, the fog was as thick as living ink seeping through earth, phosphorus fire blinked 3 times in synchronicity, the sound of bells rang intermittently and penetrated the brain, the soles of Lin Fan's feet rustled again, and the hallucination of the residual tide of thousands of insects pulled at the corners of his clothes and tore the corners of his clothes. Cold hooks stabbed at his ankles. Legs curled up, the butt of the gun hit the ground, sparks flew out, and he roared. On the verge of collapse, brother, the rustling on the soles of the feet is coming again. I'm imagining my mother's corpse biting her neck and intestines. The rustling phosphorus fire blinked out, and the bullets couldn't suppress Quan Tuanyuan. The fear revived and science collapsed. He said roughly, the arm trembled as he pulled the trigger, and the gun went bang. The muzzle shifted. The rotten sweetness in the nose suddenly swelled, spasms, and black blood scabs were coughed. The villagers screamed and covered their ears. The old woman knelt down and trembled. The hero's lingering sound. The soul-eating village is in trouble again. The god's palm jade suppresses it quickly. The jade piece in Lin Fan's palm was buzzing with green light, and in his mind, the ghost of Yi Ji appeared, with a slender green light, beautiful eyes, red phoenix pupils, soft light, shimmering, fragrant and sweaty lingering curves. The air was filled with the scent of blood and sulfur, and he whispered hoarsely, Mr. Lin, the blood will always be with you, and the aftershocks will be reversed. The heart core will melt again and drop blood to suppress the source. The lingering shadow of Mushue's pale girl was wide open and coughing green. The blood-smoke body, the yin qi wrapped around the palms, frost and cold erupted, the map faded and whispered, the abyss is divided, there is no danger outside the village. He drew the dagger on the palm, the blood dripped, the jade buzzed, the green fire pulsed in the sky, piercing the phantom sand and sand, the tide receded, the soles of the feet were frosty and sticky, thousands of insects knelt down and licked the ashes, flying servants collapsed, the phosphorus fire blinked out, the regular intermittent sound of the bells, the eternal fog, the shadows rolled back the mounds of silence. Chu Tian's thick eyes widened in shock, ecstatic tears and blood splashed, and he roared in adoration. He rushed forward with thick arms and hugged his shoulders. Lin Fan's divine palm is awesome again. Yi Jimu's snow soul used the aftermath to shatter my gun, and the phantom intestines will never die. Fear turned to fanaticism. The villagers' eyes widened with admiration. The young man clenched his fists and roared, the god shed his blood to suppress the source. The fog, shadow, phosphorus and fire bells in the cemetery wiped out the whole village and made Yong safe and famous as an archaeological legend in the wild. As night falls in the village medical center, the candlelight flickers, the bitter and pungent herbal medicines are applied to the nose, and the blood scabs melt and the spicy pain is relieved. Lin Fan sits cross-legged on the edge of the bed, and the eternal shadow in his mind overwhelms the dream. The sudden attack, the ghost of Yi Ji throws himself on the knees and chest, the hot breath splashes, the beautiful eyes are attached, whispering, eternally, Mu Shui is wrapped in smoke. The green light on his arms flickered, the aftermath of the ham wind flashed, he coughed green blood and fell to the ground, Li Xiu's intestinal puppet jumped again, the hooked claws grabbed the neck, the blood plasma sprayed out, and he hallucinated a mother's corpse biting the soul, phosphorus fire blinked for 3 minutes, synchronized with the abyss swallowing the sky-hot spring. Gulu burned the skin on his back. He woke up with cold sweat dripping with tenderness, the jade green light in his palm pulsated and hummed to soothe his heartbeat. On the opposite side of the bed where Chu Tian's thick legs were wrapped in cloth, his thick eyes widened with fear and the aftermath was twisted with sweat and blood, and he growled, "Brother's dream is coming back. I'm on the verge of collapse with hallucination gun blasting my head and black pulp corroding it, but my brother's intestines biting his neck and his blood spurting out will never dissipate. Lin is on the verge of collapse." Fan shook his head with cold eyes. "Growth, the reverse order of the talisman is permanent, and the puzzle is more than just an illusion." He stood up and knocked on the window frame with a shovel. Sparks of ash remained, and the cemetery mound outside the window was filled with white mist. Sulfur faded away, and the first chirping of birds was blown by the breeze. The village chief held a night meeting to discuss ancient books, parchment scrolls, and runes on the table. The runes pulsated against the afterglow of green light and his voice was hoarse. Hero Palm Jade Town Village, Xian Mingzi's 1,000-year magical art, 100 spirits blood sacrifice, melting slave regret source in the village was completely destroyed, but there are rumors of the aftermath of the abyss. After the regret was broken, the soul wandered and lurked outside the village. The villagers fell silent. The air-conditioned women and children screamed and the old man knelt down with wrinkles wide open in fear. The god Yiji's bloodline Mu Shui divided his soul and offered Li Xiu a gun to blow up the heart to protect the students. What if the aftermath devastated the village? Chu Tian smiled and slapped his chest with blood oozing out and roared proudly, "I am behind the palace and weaving a heavy rain of shotguns to weave a net and finally push it against my chest." The explosive black robe corroded the phosphorus and the fire was extinguished, but Lin Fan's divine eyes' ingenuity broke through the awesome law of blood melting and the aftermath was safe. Lin Fan's palm jade scroll buzzed with green light, pulling the sheepskin runes, and the whole image of the Shanghai reversed and embossed. The guardian array is activated. The village talisman is suppressed. Forever. The jade pieces peeled off, green fire rushed into the volume, the frost and cold spread in the hospital, the air twisted and choked the lungs, the smell of iron and rust, the gel shattered, the villagers widened their eyes in shock and the admiring peak youth roared, "The hero activates the ancient formation, it's awesome. There will never be a reptile in the village, it will move into the abyss, swallow the abyss, and it will be safe." Dawn breaks through the foggy mountain village again, and smoke curls up from cooking stoves, dogs bark faintly. Lin Fan leans against the door, his thick arms touch each other, blood scabs and new flesh squirm, the sand in his feet disappears intermittently, the jade piece in the palm of his hand is an empty shell, the green light stays in his brain forever, the archaeological status rises, the treasure is a treasure, and the legend spreads all over the world. He whispered, "The meaning of adventure, curiosity has overflowed and we have been in danger many times. Today, we solve puzzles and become calm and suppress despair." Yizimukshu and Li Xiuhua sacrificed their lives to warn that the unknown fear will always exist. Chu Tian's thick eyes flashed in pain and his grief turned to fervor and determination. He roared loudly and laughed, "Brother Lin Fan is now the leader of the gods. Night treasure hunt turns to eternal legendary gunfire protector soul. With the use of the reverse talisman to break the core, I will collapse from fear and turn to science plus taboo to be invincible. I will never visit the cemetery again, but I will always conquer the world with my brothers." The village chief offered wine with the aroma of rice, and the hot steam steamed his face with a trembling voice. "The hero will leave his name on the village monument, and it will be passed down to future generations. The undead maniac wakes up at midnight in the cemetery, crawls on the floor, and escapes through the wall to break the curse." At noon, the village road was bustling with children chasing and laughing, surrounding the two people. On the slope, the scars were covered with blood, scabs, and the hooks had healed and the skin was tight. Lin Fan recounted the whole history. Yiji's ghost pressed hot breath on his chest, and Mu Shuyan protected his speed while rushing towards Li Xiu's intestines. The details were never hidden. The heart-gnawing hot spring exploded and collapsed. The villagers gasped and screamed. The old woman covered her face and knelt tremblingly. The girl's anti-spiritual map is used to speed up, and the sharp-shooting brothers break the 1,000-year-old evil. The young man clenched his fists and worshipped, the hero has grown to be awesome. From curious archaeology to the peak of resourcefulness, the palm talisman reverses the blood and suppresses the source, and the reputation of the village's safety spreads to the city to warn future generations of MOE detective. The child's round eyes blinked and touched the empty jade piece with the green glow. Uncle, treasure eternal light, the fear of illusion will be cut off forever. But Lin Fan glanced at the distant shadow of the cemetery, the trembling mounds, the phosphorus fire disappeared in the mist, the phantom sound of the bells, the eternal sound of the soles of the feet, the lingering sound of the soles of the feet, the unfulfilled satisfaction. There was a new suspense hidden in it. The abyss in his mind was whispering and humming with new relief, the source of regret, reincarnation. The next labyrinth, the empty shell in the palm was hot and trembling. Unknown fear followed him like a shadow. Broken silk whispered in his heart, growth continues, and the next puzzle is ready to be solved. Chu Tian's thick leg steadily hit the ground with the butt of his gun, and Mars Kanash smiled wildly with round eyes. Brothers are like gods in the world. The aftermath of the suppression is a great victory, the eternal shadow is overwhelming, but the gunfire and resourcefulness are invincible. The villagers surrounded him with the smell of hot wine in the distance, and followed the old man leaning on his staff with a trembling voice in awe. The man of God is gone, and the village monument will forever tell the legend of the death of the cemetery to warn the world. The mountain road is winding, the sun is dazzling, the pungent smell of moss is blowing in the face, the cold wind is blowing in the face. Lin Fan walks side by side with Chu Tian, the blood scabs, the new flesh squirms, the pain turns, the steps are firm, the lingering image of the snow in the brain is tenderly attached to the phosphorus fire, the law of blinking is forever cut off, all insects turn to ashes. The hot spring gulu cuts off the fascination, the palace collapses into ashes, the achievement releases, and the fear in the heart turns to warning and contentment, but the empty shell in the palm of the hand pulses with green light and a new whisper looms. The unknown abyss and the aftermath of the wandering soul lurk outside the village. There is a horror waiting to be solved. The reader's heart is filled with excitement, shock, and fear. While fleeing, the giant corpse roared out, Li Xiu's incinerated limbs and intestines were reassembled, the puppet twisted and beat again, its heart pulse banged, phosphorus fire and green light, its head roared, "Brother, eat." The claws stretched out to grab Lin Fan's flesh and blood, rolling and rusty, sweet and tangy. Chu Tian roared and lunged at the muzzle. The defender's fire netted on the ground with pain, and he used his hooked claws to grab the empty blood and burn his face. His thick eyes widened with fear, then he turned to fanatical worship and slapped Lin Fan's arm with blood and pain. Lin Fan's divine eyes predicted the rules of the puppet, and his gun trump card exploded into dust. Scientific revenge is awesome.